This is the GPL podcast, part of the Pull Tab Sports family.
Leo, how was your recruiting?
My recruiting, I probably had 76 D1 offers.
The thing is, if I drink whiskey, I will not be able to function.
Perfect. Let's do it.
It's happened before.
Oh boy. Juke making mistakes. I love it. And so I had to train for this marathon.
Make sure you stay awake for the game tomorrow, too.
Now, here's Jupiter and Vigo. Good evening and welcome to the GPL podcast. Summer 2025 version, Vigs. We did this the last couple of years. We did that show for Mariucci, and then last year we did a show. Now we're just going to have the summer show, huh?
That's right. I mean, there's a changing landscape in college athletics, and hockey is a part of it. I mean, all the CHL commitments this summer and the money being talked about. Times are changing.
$700,000 being talked about?
Maybe. We'll see someday. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Who knows if it's true, huh?
Exactly.
Well, we've been kind of talking back and forth with Nick Angell for quite some time, Vigs, about, he's been saying, kind of hinting, hey, I want to create a collective. We need to do something from the players. So we thought we'd have him on along with a 20-year GPLer, Eric Brever. So let's bring him in. Nick Angell, Eric Brever. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining the show again.
Great to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Eric, we've had you on. I think you've been on Overtime once or twice, I think,
Something
talking
like
all this legal stuff. So it's NIL. It's kind of a crazy thing that you and Nick are dealing with.
Yeah, it's a new world, and obviously it's fast changing stuff. And Nick and I connected here talking Gopher hockey and a collective. I've had experience teaching the subject at St. Cloud State as adjunct faculty, so I'm close to it, and I'm keep up to date with it, and feel pretty comfortable and confident in talking everybody through it. So I think it's probably worthwhile to bring it to the Gopher masses here.
And I'm glad you're around to help Nick kind of navigate this, because there's been a lot of crazes, Nick. But first, what was your thought? What was your reasoning in saying we need just a Gopher hockey NIL?
I mean, I think just talking with Eric, and you're kind of part of this community, and I think everybody, whether you're a player, you're a fan, if you're on the ice or you're up in the stands, everybody's just kind of bleeding maroon and gold, and you're seeing this landscape change, and you're concerned that, are we changing fast enough? Are we evolving? And I felt like we needed to evolve quicker. You started seeing things happen as far as kids signing, getting deals, getting collective offers. The landscape was just changing, and I felt like, okay, either we need to evolve, or you can ask the T-Rex how evolution worked for him. So we needed to move forward with something, or at least get the wheels moving, because by the time you think, oh wow, the landscape has changed, if you have already not started to adapt, if not already adapted, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get that ball rolling. And what you're seeing now is schools really starting to adapt this and use it to their advantage. And that's something I think we have a natural in with, being a big market. So it was pretty important to connect with people, outside of my circle. And that's where Eric and I connected. It was like, hey, if we need, it's a legal landscape, kind of a legal field. And we want to do this the right way. And we want to do it well, that helps the players and works with the existing collectives that are out there, as well as the athletic department.
So a couple months ago, maybe a little longer ago, you created Golden Helmet Collective. Tell us about it.
That was just kind of our first start, right? You need a name. So just thinking, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. you know, it was just like, okay, let's get the ball rolling here. Let's start out with a logo. And then once we've kind of built this entity, as the landscape starts to change, whether it's revenue sharing, it's deals, it's however it's going to move, we can be pretty fluid in how we adapt to the evolving situations. So, okay, let's get an LLC, let's get the logo, let's start building something, and then be very fluid in how we can adapt to this changing landscape that has kind of, we thought we had a pretty good handle on it. And then we get thrown a curveball, and then they say, okay, no, you can't throw curveballs anymore. So it's been pretty wild, you know, where we thought, geez, hey, we could probably be ready to launch in like a week if we had to. And then NCAA comes out with some different rulings, and then it gets a little more interesting. And that's where Eric kind of comes in and says, okay, here's what's happening. Here's kind of the nuances of it. There's certainly a lot of changes out there, but the biggest thing was to get something started.
Yeah, and on that point, if I can jump in on that, you know, we had a lot of time to sit and think about what we wanted this to look like. And at a base level, we want this really to go to the student athletes themselves. We want this to go to the players, whatever we do. We want them to be in control. We don't want this to be a profit center where Nick or myself or anybody else is earning anything. We would really want this to be focused on really supporting the program. So that's always been a benchmark, and all the structures we've created have been with that in mind. So,
Vigs,
one thing I would
go ahead.
in real quick, and we did want to make some differences where, to kind of add on what Eric just said, we wanted to be unique, and we wanted it to be player driven, fan driven, and be totally transparent. And I think one thing that really sets us apart and what makes people excited, whether they're fans, supporters, players, or staff, is nobody takes a salary. Nobody makes a dollar from this. And certainly we'll have some expenses. Websites don't build themselves, payment processing, et cetera, marketing. But nobody is taking a salary, and 100% of the net revenue will go to these kids. And I think when people realize, like, wow, these are just Gopher people doing the best thing that they can for Gopher hockey, because they know that it's not just the M on the sweater, the banners in the stands. This is part of our community, and it shapes who we are as people, as Northlanders here, as Minnesotans. So that was kind of the impetus to start something really holistic that benefits those players without any like outside influences.
Vigs, I was going to say, you know, we've seen NIL football in basketball, but now really the last year and a half, it's creeping in to college hockey. And this year, it sounds like it's just all of a sudden just gone right up.
Yeah, as you know, Eric and Nick were talking about, it takes a little bit of time to form these collectives, go through all the steps and the processes to get them started. And then the fundraising money has to come in. And I think for a lot of institutions, you know, it took a year or two for them to start getting the wheels turning. And now you're seeing the impact across college hockey. The schools that were really aggressive in setting up these groups are now showing the fruits of their rewards with the commitments they're getting, the transfers they're getting, and they're just, you know, able to, you know, push a lever that's attractive to some of these hockey players to get a little bit more than just room and board and tuition type stuff.
Yeah, it's been a crazy summer because you had NIL, you have Canadian juniors players coming in. But Eric, where does this all start? You know, I see a couple notes you left for me about whole background about how all of this NIL stuff started. Can you give us a basis of where this all is coming from?
Yeah, how long do we got? But yeah, we'll walk through it. Yeah, at a base level, we have to remember, you know, what the NCAA has historically been, and where it's going, you know, as a result of some of the decisions that were made within the last 20 to 30 years with regard to media decisions specifically. So you think of the classical NCAA, you know, 50 years ago, and the whole idea was this idea of amateur athletics, right? That college athletes should be student athletes and you know, Olympians with the overall aspect of that amateur component. So the NCAA over time built up all these structures to kind of protect against that. You can't have an agent. You can't have any professional type earnings that are kind of leading toward your sport itself. So that's sort of the starting spot with all of it. But at the same time, you had schools that were kind of looking and entering into these very big dollar media contracts and the like to broadcast football games and the like. And the classic example of this actually was a college basketball game, a college basketball video game that EA Sports would sponsor itself. And a guy by the name of Ed O'Bannon, who played for UCLA in the late 1990s.
I remember him.
He went over to his buddy's house one day. And there's a great picture in what I sent you, Viggs, if you can pull it up, of Ed O'Bannon realistically playing for UCLA. And then also Ed O'Bannon, UCLA number 31, playing in this college basketball video game. And when you look at it, they're identical to one another. They're the same height, same weight. They look exactly the same, except the one on the left is actually Ed O'Bannon. The one on the right is UCLA number 31. And Ed O'Bannon looks and says, hey, wait a minute here. This isn't fair. They're using essentially what is me in this video game, and I'm not getting compensated. So what do you think Ed O'Bannon does? He runs the lawyer and sues, like any good red-blooded American would. So he goes to the lawyer and starts this massive lawsuit suing everybody under the sun you can think of, the NCAA, UCLA, the Pac, whatever it be, Pac-10 conference at the time, Pac-12 now, sues everybody under the sun, which leads to about 5 years of litigation plus, and then even more thereafter. And Claudia Wilken, who is the judge who actually just did this most recent ruling, which we'll get to in a little bit, I'm sure, came down with a really well-worded decision to oversee or kind of govern this particular result. And basically what it came down to is that, first, the NCAA is not God. It doesn't have this antitrust exemption in the marketplace, which was later affirmed by the Supreme Court in a different case. It really is not important in this whole NIL space, but Supreme Court ruled on it, so therefore we have to think of it. But the NCAA basically needs to stay in its lane. In other words, it can conduct extracurricular activities. It can conduct sports itself, but it can't regulate things outside of the sport that you're talking about. In other words, student-athlete free time is student-athlete free time. And if student-athletes want to do things in their free time that's not associated with the sport directly, the NCAA cannot govern that. Okay, and when you think about that, it's kind of obvious, but at the same level, the NCAA for years have built all these structures to regulate amateurism.
Oh boy, have they.
How do you now separate those two, right? So this Claudia Wilken decision, Judge Wilken decision came down saying the NCAA has to stay in its lane, can regulate the games and eligibility and stuff related to the actual activities itself of a sport, but anything outside of that, the NCAA cannot really do. So what it meant is that, for example, student athletes can have agents or advisors to assist them in understanding how this is supposed to fit together. Well, the NCAA previously said that's an absolute no, it can't do that. But this decision says, no, it has to be allowed. But in the same vein, the decision also said the NCAA can still restrict compensation for playing the sport itself. And the question among sort of legal scholars in this is, how do you separate the two? Because really what we're talking about here is brands, right? A student athlete's brand. You think of Michael Jordan and the Jumpman Nike logo and the like. The good example that I have was Mohamed Ibrahim for the University of Minnesota football team. He was spotted on the sideline of one game after he's running for another 100 yards in that particular game, eating at Gushers. Within a day or so, they look and say, well, hey, we're giving you a sponsorship, General Mills, for Mohamed Ibrahim because he apparently likes Gushers, right? But you could also look at that and say, hey,
there it is.
Yes, there it is. But you could also look at that and say, hey, is this a good way that we can give him more than just a sponsorship by General Mills? What if General Mills says, why don't we give you $3 million for that sponsorship, right? Not just funneling you an actual cost of being a spokesperson, but we'll give you lots and lots of money for that. So would that be offered to the same, say, long snapper on the Gopher football team? or the bullpen catcher on the Gopher baseball team? Probably not. But, it's the leading rusher in school history. Yeah, they would get some of that type of compensation. So you found this really difficult situation going back and forth where the NCAA says, hey, we can't do compensation for performance on the field, but really those who are performing well on the field have better brand recognition, and as a result, they get compensated better.
This is the mess, Viggs. This is the mess.
Well, I remember back when Jeremy Bloom was an Olympic skier at Colorado, and he started playing football. And it was very common for the Olympic skiers to be getting all this compensation from skiing companies and brands and equipment. But then when he stepped onto the football field, it was a huge question of how is this going to be legal? And the NCAA just made it up as they went along, and they let him continue to have his skiing endorsements and let him play football. And he eventually, got drafted in the NFL and got to try out, I think, with the Philadelphia Eagles for a little bit. But, this has been around college athletics for a long time. And it's just, a couple legal rulings here and there, and now it's legal.
Yeah, and so Pandora's box basically got opened by that, right?
Yeah.
So, as a result, schools who had some well-heeled owners could basically say, hey, we're going to hire so-and-so as our spokesperson, and therefore we're just compensating them directly for it. Okay, now a couple notes with this. What's actually being sold here is the brand, right? The student athletes, their name, their image, the likeness of this. Think Ed O'Bannon, the video game, right? Total brand of Ed O'Bannon, what he has to sell as a student athlete. But when you boil that down itself, what does that look like in the marketplace? Okay, a good example of this is what's their market reach on Instagram? Okay. It's completely a market shifter from what we've previously had, because things like Livy Dunn blow the market open, right? Prior to this particular ruling in O'Bannon, Livy Dunn would have probably been kind of an average influencer, so to speak. But as a student athlete at LSU and a gymnast who, does a lot of work on Instagram, well, suddenly it's, whoa, changes the whole game, changes the whole focus on women's athletics. I'm not going to say for good or bad, but it just changed the market and how we look at some of these sports overnight.
Well, you did put a graphic together. Let me show this. The top 10 NIL athletes. Shedeur Sanders obviously had a CU, and of course Travis Hunter was football. But there's that Livy Dunn, like you just mentioned.
Yeah,
holy buckets, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and you look at somebody like that and you say, well, she's got a market reach, in her Instagram. If she puts out a post advertising for a particular brand, it's going to be seen by a lot of people. But you look at Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, for example, at Colorado. Sanders, of course, having the family name that he has. But, some of that's just naked compensation that's going to these student athletes. Cooper Flagg, Arch Manning, Cam Ward, there's just some naked money that's going right to these individuals really to play for their particular schools itself. But again, pay for play is not legal, even under the new rules of the NCAA that were provided at the time. So they were kind of masked as compensation through this NIL type way.
And Nick, I believe Coach Woog put at least like a couple $100 under a hat for you, didn't he, at least once? Or is it just, showing up in his tidy whities?
Yeah, my recruiting experience was a little different. Like, I just really wanted to come there. There was no money getting exchanged anywhere for me. Yeah, so no, it was nothing. We had nothing like that. And, and right or wrong, it kind of is what it is what it is now.
Well, what did a scholarship include for you?
Yeah.
And
so
what were you paying, or what was you doing for you? And over the years, what did your family still have to come up with?
Yeah. So it was books, tuition. Those are just obviously all your books, all your classes. And then they gave you a stipend if you wanted to live in the dorm, and then your food as well. And then if you wanted to live off campus, they gave you a check for what that dorm and food money was worth. And then if you wanted to live in a really fancy place, you had to pick up the difference. If you wanted to live in a cardboard box, you could probably pocket a little bit extra cash, but it was not very like glamorous. I think everybody thinks it's so glamorous. I sold cars at Denny Hecker Volkswagen in Inver Grove Heights in the off season. And then I worked at Grandma's Restaurant and Saloon as well in the off season, just tried to make as much money as I could. So I had a little bit of fun money to play with, like a normal college student athlete, because I didn't want to lean on my parents or take a student loan out.
Viggs, I think I met you at Grandma's. That might have been the first time I met you.
I mean, they used to have quarter beers there. It was quite the pre-inflation way to have a few bevies.
It was, I used to do the bartending, barback, and DJ. So it was, I can still remember it. I did the advertising. It was 75-cent Mick bottles every Thursday, Friday night at Grandma's Restaurant Saloon, 18 party, 21 to drink. Come on down. So that was another life for me. But that was my summer job. And I worked my buns off so that I had money. And it was interesting. You see a lot of these kids that come from very meager places, like very kind of inner city kids. And I remember I asked one of the guys, and I said, "Man, you're always just wearing all these like Daffy Duck and Donald Duck t-shirts. Are you just a big Disney fan?" He said, "No, my mom works at one of the Orlando studios or something like that." And that was the clothes he had. It was either that or the team issued gear. And I remember it was sad because like guys didn't want to be on a group project with them, because if you had to buy poster board and markers and stuff like that there was nothing for you for that in that scholarship. So you needed that extra money. And it's like, I mean, this guy is an amazing talent. So I absolutely understand where these guys are coming from.
So Eric, where does this leave us with collectives themselves?
Well, yeah, and the collectives were sort of a grassroots way of kind of supporting this NIL movement. Was sort of their idea in place. And you had a bunch of them starting up. Many schools had many different collectives, all with competing interests. Most schools now have kind of whittled down to one main collective to oversee things. And at a base level, the idea was simple, was to get money from the community around it to support student athletes in a collective way. So the thinking being, if the money can be raised by a lot of different people and put into one pool, it can benefit student athletes all potentially equally. That was the original thought, but within a very short period of time, say a matter of months, collectives started creating some separate pots of money that could be used to incentivize, say, potential recruits to come to their school versus another school. Originally, collectives were not allowed to contact a prospective student athlete and say, "Hey, come to Minnesota instead of Michigan State. We'll give you this amount." Well, within about 2 months after the initial rules were brought out, court cases said, "No, NCAA can't have that rule. That's impeding the marketplace from this brand stuff again, antitrust issue." And as a result, that allowed for collectives to start the process of recruiting on behalf of schools. So suddenly these well-heeled donors could put money into a collective to go to a student athlete and therefore incentivize the student athlete to come to that particular school itself. So that's how the collectives came to be. And that up until, say, about 2 months ago, that's really the way the world worked. So you see a guy like, I'll use McKenna at Penn State, and this is a little bit special because his happened after this deadline piece, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But, over the last year to 2 years, you were seeing these collectives as the fundraisers to say, "Come here, and this is what it's worth for you to be compensated for this." Okay. Now, one other note before going any further with this, all of these monies that are being received with these collectives for this brand recognition is taxable income to these student athletes. Now, in contrast to Nick, talking about his scholarships are generally not taxable. So a student athlete getting scholarship monies, you're not paying any income tax on that, accordingly. But when you sell your name, image, and likeness and your brand, any income you receive is taxable to you. Okay. Now that's for a U.S. citizen, it's not a huge deal. You understand that piece, but most foreign students are here on student visas. And as a result, that restricts you from earning money while on the student visa in the United States. So that plays a role in terms of what an NIL collective could do to say a Swedish student playing hockey for the University of Minnesota, or a Canadian student coming to the United States to play hockey as well. They wouldn't be necessarily able to earn NIL dollars directly within the United States for those activities. So that means a collective would have to find work in Canada to be able to leverage that for the Canadian student, or Sweden, for example, for a Swedish student.
Quick question, Eric, on this. So now that we have the revenue share also muddying the waters, is that one way a school could pay a Canadian player money out of the revenue share pot, and that could go to them, and then the collective money that was maybe intended for that player could go somewhere else to an American player?
Well, maybe. But let's get back to what that revenue share is about here. So that revenue share is actually derived from something called, or we know in the business, so to speak, as the house settlement. And the house was actually the name of a student athlete, a swimmer. I don't remember which school it was at, Oregon, I think, that developed a class action lawsuit among student athletes saying, hey, wait a minute, I could have made money when I was a student athlete, but these rules prevented me from doing so. So I want a piece of that pie that I could have made. So that led to more litigation, a class action lawsuit involving all of the former NCAA players over the last however many years, saying we want a piece of the pie now that the NIL is now legal in the NCAA. And that was settled among the Power 5 conferences. And it led kind of these big terms that you'll see on the screen here. Okay, and the first is that it allowed for schools to have roughly what's called a salary cap. Each year they can directly make NIL payments to the tune of about $21 or $20.5 million annually. And that amount's going to be subject to some degree of variability based on how much Power 5 conferences take in as annual revenue itself. Figure about a $21 million salary cap for our purposes here. Okay. It also allows for schools to eliminate scholarship restrictions. So anybody on a roster could, in theory, be on a scholarship. But they also put caps on the number of roster spots. So that's been some concern because it could eliminate walk-on players, for example. Okay. But to avoid that restriction of walk-on players, they put an initial restriction saying the first $2.5 million of new scholarships that a school would create to bring, say, the current 18 up for hockey up to, say, 25, 26 for the new cap. If you added 8 scholarships, the cost of that goes against your $21 million salary cap as an institution, which can really change how you might look at that, or adding scholarships in some sports, at least initially, like the University of Minnesota. Because if you got only $21 million for NIL dollars, only $21 million for NIL dollars, if I lose 2.5 to give new scholarships, well, I won't have as much to kind of sweeten the pot for a better player, perhaps. Okay. This house settlement also has a trust fund pool. So over the next 10 years, power conferences and the NCAA are going to put $2 billion into this trust fund to be paid out to former athletes. And then it sets up an arbitration plan to oversee this whole regime that they're looking at. And finally, it allows for these collectives, in theory, to still to exist. And businesses can still contract with players directly as third-party NIL deals. But any NIL deal going forward has to go through an automated system overseen by the consulting firm Deloitte called NIL Go to oversee and make sure that this is actually a legitimate NIL deal and not just a naked pay for play. Okay, so there's a lot that went on in this particular lawsuit. That's kind of led to some of the confusion over the summer, particularly here, as you see on the screen, because in July or early July of this year, and Nick and I had met with, folks at the University of Minnesota. We had met with some of the folks at Dinkytown Athletes, and we were really excited to kind of start laying this out and building the framework. And then in early July, the NCAA says, hey, wait a minute, any prospective third-party NIL deal, which like Golden Helmet Collective would be looking toward, has to have a production of a profit. And we're like, wait a minute here. We're trying to do this really for full transparency. We don't want to make a profit off of this. We want to benefit student athletes. So this essentially outlaws what we're looking to do. And most NIL collectives around the country were outlawed from doing what they were currently doing. So that backlash lasted about 3 to 4 weeks. And they hurriedly created a new guidance, basically saying the activity itself has to be for the production of profit, not necessarily the entity that's talking about it. So in other words,
so is it a bunch of people just got together and said, hold on a second, we've already got so much in place here. This really messes it up.
Kinda. That's sort of the backlash of, hey, we like this. Some of this is really not a bad deal necessarily, provided that it's just not naked compensation for pay for play. What's the problem here? In essence, this NIL Go system, this House lawsuit, it was trying to be as close to a collective bargaining agreement that you might see in, say, the NHL or in the NFL. There's the players union and there's the ownership, and they get together and they create these contracts called collective bargaining agreements, right? So that's essentially what's happening here. But the issue is that we don't want student athletes necessarily to be employees, because that entails workers' compensation. It employs all sorts of overtime restrictions and compensation, minimum wage laws. And all sorts of issues get brought into that piece. So how do we create a collective bargaining agreement without having a union of employees and management, which would be the universities, getting together and saying, this is how we're going to conduct this stuff? This is as close as we can get to making this stuff happen, is this House lawsuit settlement. So that's where this comes from. And again, Judge Claudia Wilkin again, was responsible for overseeing this. And she went through this class action lawsuit. She initially rejected or did not approve the initial settlement. She finally did approve it based on some roster cap aspects and making sure student athletes that were going to otherwise be cut because of these roster limitations could still find other places to play. Not really important for our purposes, but basically, this went through a lot of legal scrutiny to get to this point, and create this framework of a collective bargaining agreement that's just not quite a collective bargaining agreement.
Well, I just remember getting a phone call from you, Nick, in early July saying, look what I just found out, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, 10 minutes in, Brever's calling, gotta go, click.
Yeah, it was.
It was a super concern.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a shock not only for us, and I think we were fortunate that we really hadn't launched. Right, people had kind of heard some rumblings. I think Gopher Puck Live might have shared a story and a little website, and
maybe
but we really hadn't launched. And for a lot of the collectives that were already out there, that were established, just saying, hey, this is what we're doing, that ruling basically said you're out of business, right? So it was kind of an opportunity for us to just maybe pump the brakes and see how we can evolve into this landscape, because we know that if you look at, obviously we're talking about hockey right now, but if you look at football and basketball, these collectives from Alabama, Texas, some of the SEC, ACC, et cetera, right? There are some incredibly powerful collectives out there. And Eric and I just kind of sat back and we chatted and we're like, all right, let's let them hash this out. And we think that maybe they might have overstepped a little bit, and we're going to just kind of hold our cards closer to our chest and just let this play out. And now it seems like they've come to some sort of resolution where fans are able to contribute, to be part of an organization, help fund the players, help fund the teams. And collectives are able to be part of that. But it was even when I was texting with you and talking with you, you're like, hold on, what's happening? I'm like, yeah, this is breaking news right now.
Yeah, and the key aspect now in all these activities is a student athlete has to do something to get compensated for it. So, gone are the days where a student athlete could just be nakedly compensated saying, oh, you're our spokesperson, wink, wink, nod, nod. Now they're going to actually look and say, what does that entail? How many times do you have to appear to be that spokesperson? Where do you have to appear? What do you have to dress in? All of those things go into that particular aspect. And this NIL Go system will evaluate and say, is that market price? So that way you don't have, the backup quarterback at Texas making, $1 million a year to sit in the sidelines. You actually have to say, I'm going to be making X number of appearances, signing this many autographs and, conducting these many clinics or camps to be able to justify the money that you're making from the NIL monies. So I like to say gone are the days of the big NIL dollars, at least short-term wise. There's a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys that would probably disagree with me saying, hey, that's not legal. They can't do this. But I kind of think it might be, based on what I know in the antitrust rules and this class action settlement. But for at least the interim or the short term, right now, you're not going to see the big dollars in the next cycle. That being said, this House lawsuit settlement came into effect on July 1st of this year. Everybody knew it was coming into effect around July 1st of this year. So everybody started front loading deals for this coming school year, get them paid out prior to July 1st, locking it in so they can actually have no salary cap whatsoever. And we're just kind of working through this for this next school year. But next year, next summer, you'll have a salary cap, you'll have some restrictions with it, and the big NIL dollars are going to have to be justified, with actually what we call activations. They have to actually perform to be able to get this compensation.
So Viggs, part of this is, $20.5 million for the U to spend. A huge bulk of it's going to go to football. Another large bucket's going to go to basketball, men's and women's, and volleyball. And it seems like Minnesota's going to get just a very little bit, which could only equal like $200,000 or $300,000 ish. So as of right now, is what we know, Minnesota is not going to do scholarships for everybody. They're still on 18 scholarships now. So have things really changed at Minnesota, you think, so far, Viggs?
I don't think the House settlement is something that's going to be changing for men's hockey and women's hockey. There's not a lot of dollars that are going to be left over once they pay out, the football, basketball players to go to hockey. So it's a big challenge for, Golden Helmet Collective to figure out how they can make an impact, because we're definitely seeing that across college hockey right now as people are not relying on the House settlement. They're not relying on these big collectives. They're kind of forming their own groups to support hockey. And I think if there's going to be a change, it's going to be up to the hockey community to do that.
And we don't know what, we've heard hush hush whisper numbers. We don't know, but let's just use your number, Jupe, because you said 200,000 or 300,000.
You just go by the percentages.
Let's just say it's 200,000 or 300,000, right? The interesting thing and kind of the scary thing and the thing that kind of makes Golden Helmet even more of a necessity is if we say, okay, Michigan State, they're probably going to have the same issues that the Gopher hockey team is having, right? Where they have big basketball, big football programs that need to get funded. I think there's a realization we all knew college sports was a money-making opportunity. It's a business, right? And now we're starting to see it being run as a business. And as much as, I would love the Gopher hockey team to have, $20.5 million all alone. I'm not a big basketball and football fan, but I get it, right? What happens when the University of Denver or UND says, you know what, that $20.5 million, that's the cap. You know what, we're going to do 5 million. And we don't really have a major Big Ten basketball or football organization to fund. Think of Denver, think of Maine, think of Bemidji State. Bemidji State doesn't really have a D1 football or basketball. So they could just say, hey, we're going to use all this money and just put it into hockey. And the Gophers have $200,000 or $300,000 to use your number. Whereas these other smaller schools that don't have to fund a major basketball or football or another major sport, it kind of gets real scary. And that's where having a robust collective to help supplement what's already available to the team is probably pretty important.
And just to go off of Nick, like Boston University, Providence, those are other hockey specialty schools that are competing in that marketplace. Colorado College, another school like that. There's a lot of them in college hockey where they don't have these football programs and basketball programs that have big revenues. So if their hockey programs can be successful and they have a passionate community to supplement it, it makes it easier for those schools to get in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Eric, I'm kind of wondering, something like a Big Ten school has a huge load of money coming in from football contracts and TV contracts. I don't think UND and Denver have huge TV contracts. They could spend up to $20 million, but it's a lot harder for them to have that $20 million, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even the University of Minnesota, a $20 million, they have to find $20 million from wherever in the
True.
athletic department and fund this house obligations. I mean, it doesn't grow on trees. They have to actually find this. So they're still cutting at the University of Minnesota positions and times and hours so they can afford the house lawsuit. That's just for them to break even accordingly. Now you look at a St. Cloud State, for example. I don't have any inside necessarily the athletic department at St. Cloud State, but you look and say, well, are they going to be able to afford raising more money to keep up with the University of Minnesota, even to pay what the University of Minnesota is doing? So if the number is 300,000, where are they going to get 300,000 more on top of what they're already getting to be able to make this happen? The Star Trib made a big deal a couple weeks ago, I think, when they noted that University of Minnesota students are actually having to pay a student fee to pay for some of these athletic facilities, right? Well, most schools around the country, you actually have a student activity fee that's paying for their athletes. So, at St. Cloud State, there is an activity fee that you are paying as a student at St. Cloud State, that goes toward intercollegiate athletics there. UND has that. UMD has that. Most schools have that situation already in place. This is nothing new around the country. The question would be, if you are at North Dakota, if you are at St. Cloud State, if you are at Minnesota Duluth, how am I going to feel as a student athlete knowing that this is now essentially going to fund an NIL activity, perhaps for a student athlete? That just changes the game a little bit. One thing is for a scholarship, perhaps to have them there and have it supported at a top level. Another one is just naked compensation, again, for a brand. I don't know how that's going to go politically. There's one other issue, too, a great unknown that's also going to play into this. And I don't know if there's a good legal answer on this quite yet. Okay. And that is, when the university starts spending money on itself or for its own activities, it implicates one of these big elephants in the room we also call Title IX, right? Where you have to equitably allocate resources for opportunities for both genders. So how is that going to play into these NIL dollars? So at the University of Minnesota, for example, in most Big Ten schools are kind of looking 70 to 75% of their salary cap, for lack of a better term, is going toward football. Well, 20 to 25% is going to be split between men's basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball. Well, that means necessarily volleyball and women's basketball are not making as much as football. A good chart on it that way. And this is what I've heard, by and large across the Big Ten schools, what we're seeing. A school like Iowa, for example, might put some of that 0 to 5% toward wrestling, for example. Another school might go toward lacrosse, Rutgers, or Maryland for perhaps. I read Nebraska is not actually funding anything else. So it's 75-25 to men's basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball, and nothing going to anything else. So you're really looking across the board, but these numbers are kind of where everybody is going with it, at least the Big Ten schools. The SEC is going to be somewhat similar from what I understand. I know it doesn't get college hockey, but I did hear most SEC schools are kind of doing something similar to this, but they also have baseball to fund, right? And the one outlier I've heard is Kentucky is going to spend like 40% on men's basketball alone, but that's Kentucky. It's a big deal, for basketball at Kentucky. But that means necessarily they can't spend as much on football, women's basketball, or volleyball, and whether that's going to be in compliance with Title IX is an open question at this point. Because Title IX may come in and say, nope, you have to give equitably among the genders to make this thing work.
Oh, that could be a real troublesome.
And then one more topic on that, back to the idea of these scholarship pieces. So if Denver, for example, was going to add, scholarships up to the cap, right? So right now, previously in college hockey, you could have 18 scholarships. I think the new cap is 25 or 26. I don't remember exactly the number.
26. Yeah.
26. So they could add potentially 8 scholarships. Okay. But if you add 8 scholarships for men, Title IX has always said you have to add 8 scholarships for women someplace else too. So now you're fundraising for 16 scholarships, perhaps, to make that thing work. The men's might not be a problem, but if you're donating to Denver for men's hockey, I don't want my money necessarily going toward, a comparable women's sport necessarily. That might not be the best for a donor.
And that's why you look and say, like, people say, well, how come we don't have 26 full scholarships? It's like, all right, if we use that $200,000 or $300,000, and maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but okay, we're gonna add 8 more scholarships, and let's say it's at $40,000 a piece. Like, there's all of your NIL. So now you have nothing to give, maybe like some top recruits. So it is such a like crazy shell game that we're playing right now. And, Eric and I, we chat quite often, but well, what happens if this happens? And what happens if that happens? And I think, when we first kind of had almost kind of we'll call it a soft launch with Golden Helmet, there was a lot of buzz. People were excited. And now we're getting like some emails like, hey, what's going on? How come you guys haven't launched? What's happened? It's like, well, when you start looking at all the different puzzle pieces, the biggest thing is for us to do this right. Because right now we can be pretty malleable with what we're doing, what we're focusing on, looking at different activations for players, different memberships for members that could join. All of that is really malleable. Once you launch and you start collecting money from members to do X, Y, and Z, well, guess what? Now you can't do X, Y, and Z, and you have to figure out, well, okay, we got to do A, B, and C, right? So it's so important for us to just take our time and really understand the landscape so we can do this effectively and efficiently and really help these kids, because there is a lot of concern out there when the NCAA ruled that collectives were essentially banned. My phone was ringing from current players right now saying, okay, well, how do I do this? Do I need to put together like a marketing kit and start sending it out to different businesses? And, I just said, okay, well, let's just, take a step back, just wait a little bit. I think this is gonna, I don't want to say blow over, but I think it's going to change a little bit. I think this is a pretty malleable situation. But the student athletes were concerned as well.
Well, it's a crazy situation, and then you add the Gavin McKenna Vigs, 700,000, the numbers being put out there. It could be, we don't know for positive. It could be NIL. It could be Penn State saying, hey, we just taken a large portion that maybe could have gone to the hockey team, a couple $100,000, and we're just putting it all onto one player. And maybe we pay it out over a few years. That's just it, Vigs. We don't know real numbers or anything, because we have heard parents and agents are inflating everything.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who say, I got X, and there's no way to prove it. You even have players who are coming to Minnesota. There's some locker room talk about what they're getting to come in the portal, and there's just no way to verify that. And everyone wants to look good from what they're saying they're getting from these schools and these collectives, and it's just a big unknown. I do think we will see in the next year, as institutions report their financial spreadsheets to the NCAA as part of the process they have to go through, you'll see how much money they are actually rev sharing out. And you're going to be able to see how much they're giving to football, how much they're giving to hockey, and you're going to get to see some things that you can link up. Some of the collectives, they haven't been as careful with their tax filing, and they are putting their 501c tax documents out there that they have to report with how much money they've taken in from donors and where it's going. And so, it's a really complicated landscape. The numbers aren't very clear right now. Maybe with NIL Go, we'll be able to start to see some numbers report out that way as people do Freedom of Information Act requests on this information. But right now, it's the Wild West.
It definitely is. Before we're going to finish up in a little bit here, but we need to get to some of our sponsors here. And Vigs Lunch Bucket Hockey is back with us, of course. What do you have to say about these guys? I love these guys.
These are the guys. They've been out at a lot of fundraisers this summer. You can follow their Instagram and see as they set up their tents and show off their work. Lunch Bucket Hockey players are the hardworking grit and grind players that would do anything for their teammates. Mites, beer league, high school, whatever. This brand will hook you up with stuff you need. Apparel, lifestyle brand. There are a couple local guys from Minnesota. Hats, hoodies, tees, jerseys. Check out lunchbuckethockey.com today and see how they fit with your group.
Our boy Jack Ramsey had some jerseys made for a little tournament out in Colorado this year with Lunch Bucket. So
that's right.
That was a great addition for his team. And then, of course, Gateway Fiber on the north end there, Vigs.
Yeah, in Minnesota, we're the state of hockey, and bad internet connections are like a bad line change. It slows everything down, causes chaos. You might even lose the game. We did our fiber to the fish house this last year.
Yes.
Great internet. I know you and I both rely on fiber internet for our podcasting needs, and it's just awesome. Gateway Fiber's coming around Minnesota. Check them out in your area. They've got speeds up to 2 gigabits a second. And check out gatewayfiber.com or call 1-800-201-4339 to see if Gateway Fiber is available in your area, because life's too short for bad internet.
And then we've got a new sponsor, Vigs, Rave Sports. We've been seeing the Kinger doing a lot of videos and stuff on Rave Sports this summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's summer. It's Minnesota. You got to be on the lake. And if you are out there, check out Rave Sports. Lake life is great life. Everyone needs their own giant cooler, and you might need an aqueduct from Rave Sports, or maybe you're pulling some people around the tube. Rave Sports got you covered there. So check out ravesports.com and remember to use the promo code PULLTAB for 20% off your order. Whether you're a lake person or river person, make it the best summer ever. Rave Sports makes waves.
And of course, we thank Lunch Bucket, Gateway, and Rave Sports for sponsoring the GPL podcast. So, guys, what podcast? Something will echo there. I'm trying to think. So, what's your next steps here? Is it something that you do? Are you going to maybe try to fund scholarships? And maybe it's more of a collective to fund the scholarships to fill that gaping hole, and then you could use their money for picking those individuals. Well, what's the direction? Where do you want to kind of do now?
Well, the landscape still continues to change.
Yes.
After this this guidance has come out, we've seen the president come out with an executive order saying he's directing agencies to start creating some policy on this lake. So while that doesn't have a lot of legal standing per se, it does show a direction that, the president wants something to get involved in this. Congress has also taken up a bill that potentially would codify the terms of the House law settlement, House being, again, the lawsuit, not necessarily the House of Representatives. We're seeing still some of the stuff in flux a bit in terms of which direction this goes. The president's executive order seemed to kind of push things more toward school favorable terms. I don't know that Congress would agree with that. I mean, I think there's more desire to benefit athletes in Congress than it might be the president's perspective. So a lot of this stuff still has to be fleshed out over the next couple of I'll say weeks. And I think there will be, but when the football season kicks off in a couple of weeks, I think we're going to start seeing some sort of detente or some sort of hey, we have to have something to work here so to make sure this works for the next school year. So we'll know a lot more in a couple of weeks, I think. But Nick, you can kind of talk about other ideas that we've had and considerations that we're looking at.
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing is we want to be an amazing partner. Obviously, the University of Minnesota has the official collective Dinkytown Athletes. We think that we can be amazingly beneficial to that, be an additive piece to that. So we've had conversations with Dinkytown Athletes, and we really want to be a partner with the University of Minnesota. So we've been incredibly upfront with them, and our meetings have been incredible. And I would say Jeremiah at the University of Minnesota has done an incredibly good job. It is a difficult time when there are so many question marks about what's going to happen, what can go through, what can't, how much can we pay, how much can we not. There's so many questions out there, and I think he's done an incredible job positioning the U for success. And in our conversations with them, we've made it abundantly clear that we want to be an amazing partner with them. And, we don't want to be divisive. We want to be additive to what they bring. And, I think they've done a great job for a lot of the sports there. And we just think that there's an opportunity that we know the hockey market, we know the hockey people. And since we've launched, we've had multiple businesses come up to us and want to do collabs with us. We've got pretty good array. I can't give too much away, but we've got some really interesting opportunities. And it kind of like, I don't want to be too sentimental, but it really kind of like warms my soul to see like the businesses. These are big businesses in the state of Minnesota, national brands that people know and will respect. and they are dying to work with us right now. So it's really exciting to see just kind of the passion just kind of coming out. When we first launched or had our soft launch, just to kind of let people know, hey, here's what we're thinking, here's what we're working towards. We asked for a digital video production expert as a volunteer, and we had over 75 volunteers just for that one position as an unpaid position. It was incredible. So I think we're really excited about the way this thing is going. The biggest message we would say to all the fans out there is like, this is coming. We are working on it as fast as we can. But sometimes we just need a little bit more time just to flesh it out so that we can do it really effectively when we do launch. But we do have some really cool stuff in the works. And I think everybody's going to be really excited about some of the things that we're working on, especially with the collabs, the collaborations. And now just figuring out some of the logistics of how do we get these activations done? How do we work to be an amazing partner with the U and with Dinkytown athletes? Because I think we can be really additive to what their mission is and what ours is as well.
So we've got Nick Angell, we've got Eric Brever, and I've also heard Nick Michael might be coming out.
Yep. Nick Michael, he's got great relationships with the players, just kind of as our ambassador, our direct communications. We've got another attorney as well. We have CPAs, tax side. So, I mean, you can never have enough attorneys. And we all have full-time jobs. Nobody takes a salary from this. We are all volunteers. And it was funny. I was talking to an agent that was asking me about the landscape just last week. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah. He's like, how much are you charging? I was like, nothing. Well, you have to take something. He's like, no, this is not about me and paying my mortgage. We take nothing on this. We all have our own jobs. This is just doing what's right for an amazing program that has given, I think, all of us something special. Hey, if you want to feel warm and fuzzy, just watch the O2 National Championship highlight reel that you put together. I still get goosebumps on that, right? And I think it was almost like Woodstock, right? Where people still come up to me and they're like, hey, I was here at that time and I watched it at this bar, right? And there's something like familiar about that, right? Where we're just kind of a big family. And like I said, whether you're wearing the skates or up in the stands or playing in the band or a cheerleader, it doesn't matter. Like, we're all just great Gopher fans and we're all trying to work to put something amazing together. And I think once we do launch this, there's going to be a passion and there's going to be like a clarity and an openness about what we're doing, how we're doing it. We've had great chats with the staff, talking with Bob and Paul and Killer and Gordo, and talking to all the guys about, hey, here's what we're doing, and asking them, what do you need? How can we help you? Here's kind of our vision, but there's no point in, just having the golden helmet vision if it doesn't align with what the staff needs along with what the players need. So kind of trying to say, hey, how can we help you be more successful on the ice, be more successful on the recruiting visits, and hang more banners and make more smiles and make more memories for the next generation of Gopher players and fans to come.
Well, I see a question here from earlier, and I see Vonner wants to know. Let's see if I can get this up here. All I ask is that new NIL is the ability to get a real jersey with names and numbers on them. Viggs, it never fails when we get back to a jersey discussion on here.
Yeah, I think Gopher fans are a little jealous. North Dakota launches a new jersey for this year, and right away, the Ralph is stocked with jerseys with players, and there's just a strong desire from Gopher fandom to have something like that here. And it sounds like we might be having some new jersey branding this year. So, stay tuned for some of that.
Something that's on Eric Brever's shirt there, maybe some CCMs.
I don't know if Eric's sponsored by CCM or not. But maybe it's part of his networking for the collective.
I will take one, but that's actually a really hard legal question, by the way. When you consider that, because you're using the University of Minnesota logo with the M, on front, so it's one thing to use a student athlete on back with their name and number. That's their likeness piece, but use of the trademarked M is a complicating factor. So you'd need a couple parties to sign off on that. Gopher Creative Properties, of course, controls the logo for the University of Minnesota, and they want to make sure that and protect it appropriately. So,
well, we just see North Dakota do it in days, it seems like, and they're just ready to go. I mean, if anyone's been to Ralph Engelstead Arena, you know they've got their shop there is quite amazing, and it can do a lot. And when it comes to hockey, Vigs, I am jealous of what North Dakota has.
It's their big show in that town.
It is their big
hockey.
show.
Hockey's the big thing there. And even they've had some issues selling season tickets this year. I saw Brad Schlossman retweet that they still have season tickets available. You'd think with a slate that includes the Gophers coming to town, they would have no problem with that. But hard times across all athletics right
Tough
now.
when they're not including playoff tickets. I had to throw it in there, you know. But speaking of the, speaking of the apparel side, something we've worked on our website, and we do have the website fully active. It's just not launched yet. We will have apparel with our logo, Golden Helmet Collective logo, and there's some pretty cool logos, and we're talking with some businesses to have some kind of unique items that I think people will recognize and will want to be part of. More to come on that, but we will have a full apparel lineup, hats, shirts, hoodies, t-shirts, polos, everything. It's pretty extensive. We've partnered with another company to get that all set up. So we will have some Golden Helmet apparel when we launch officially.
Well, JJ here is literally nothing to do here in Grand Source besides get drunk or leave town on weekends. So it's hockey or leave town or get drunk, Biggs.
I don't know what you want me to say about that.
Well, Biggs, I'm heading to Grand Forks. Sound like you might be on the Grand Forks trip. It's getting closer to as a thumbs up.
I'm 50-50 right now. It's looking closer than it was earlier in the year. It looks like flights to Orlando are expensive that time of year, so we might shelve that trip for another time. And I could be Grand Forks bound. We just got to figure out travel.
Interesting. All right, I'm gonna get some hockey talk on here. Brever, how many games are you going to be at this year, or is just football so important at New Prague you're going to miss half the season?
Well, I got hockey in New Prague too. I do help with the high school team here too. I love going. I try and get as many as I can. Try and bring the girls as many as I can too. Go over the women's games at Ritter as well. So I'm certainly no stranger to it, but there's always a Brever family representative in Section 1. So we'll be there.
You see, Brever here, Nick, he loves to go down those stairs. So he goes all the way down.
Yeah, no,
you learned that's just so stupid.
No, I mean, my seats, if anybody's looking for me, they're right on the red line, top row, because I used to have to run those stairs, and I said I will never go down those stairs ever again. So that is where I am. I'm actually one off the top row. I'm waiting patiently for those to open up. But yeah, we've got 6 seats right on the red line, and I take my kids. I got twin 7-year-olds, so we'll be at a lot of games. However, I do have a full-time job, full-time dad, husband, and then work with the Gopher Hockey alumni. And then my wife, about a month ago or 2 months ago, I hadn't really fully announced that I was going forward with the Golden Helmet. She's like, "Did you launch a collective too?" So along with a couple of charitable organizations for naval special warfare that I work with, we're pretty busy, but I will try to be at as many games as I can.
Oh boy. Well, I hope we see you there, both of you there a lot this year. That would be great. Vigs, we talked about at the end of the season, a lot of players gone. But we've seen quite a few of these players that are coming in play recently at the World Junior Summer Showcase down there at the Ritter Arena. You got to talk to all these players and a couple of current Gophers and a couple of future Gophers, down the line. But in recent days and weeks, the future looks quite a bit brighter than maybe last August.
Yeah, it felt like last year the coaching staff was very cautious with filling up their pipeline with commitments. And I think part of that is people they've gone to the Gopher Hockey Insiders, or they've listened closely with their Bob Motzko translator. He didn't feel like those previous classes were worthy of crystal balling out and seeing what they're going to look like when they finally got to campus. This different class this year is one that the coaching staff is much more comfortable with, and you saw them get really aggressive getting a pair of Cullens to commit, Luka Jarvis from Stillwater. I'm trying to think, Gunnar Conboy.
Yep.
Big kid from Lakeville who's a real power forward. They finally got a Minnesota goalie and Casey from Grand Rapids. So you've seen the staff get more aggressive getting players to commit to Minnesota. And I think that's made a lot of fans happy. There are still some big names out there, Freddie Schneider, Fitzhenry, that fans probably want to see commit to Minnesota. We'll see what happens. I think some of these players are waiting to make that big choice as they see how places like the Golden Helmet Collective and the revenue sharing and how that impacts college hockey, and probably, a motivation for people like Nick and people who are concerned about Gopher hockey to get active in this space, because it is going to make a difference with players over the next couple of years where they decide to play hockey, because getting a few extra bucks can be a big motivator.
And Nick, I'm kind of curious when you kind of link in the NIL, is this whole year kind of season almost like a test season to see where things are?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a test. Talking with the coaching staff a little bit. I mean, the kids are there, they're committed. Like, it would be great if we had this amazing war chest right now and we could just disperse that out through an NCAA NIL Go compliant way. But I think a lot of teams are in the same boat, right? We've got what happened at Penn State, and we hear some hush-hush numbers and some rumors about this is what's happening here and there. But I think a lot of teams are just kind of like on the wait and see, right? Mm-hmm. And see, how is this going to work? How is this going to shape out? What's a standard rate for a social media post? Is that $5? Yeah. Is it $500? Is it $5,000? What's going to be approved by NIL Go? And certainly, they do have some basic numbers there that say, okay, anything over $600 has to be reported to NIL Go for approval. And I think a lot of teams are really waiting to see how that process goes. And, Eric, maybe you want to touch on it. I believe Deloitte has kind of a algorithm of like what's an appropriate number. And they look at your social media followers. They look at the amount of people that go to the games, et cetera, right? So everything is kind of just a little bit of a wait and see. But I think next year will be an incredibly important time to have some sort of war chest, talking with the staff saying, geez, which one of your kids do you think could go and leave the program next year, with the transfer portal? And it was like, okay, well, here, this kid might go to the NHL. And it was like, well, no, actually every one of these kids could, right? If somebody has, if you're going up against the New York Yankees, right, it is now a business, and, every one of these kids is susceptible to leave, right? So having something that's like in place and ready to go for next year is big. But I think, we would definitely like to get going now so that we kind of build that up and start acclimating to the new environment as it starts to roll out.
Because I do think, like, when Jimmy Snuggerud decided to come back, there was a legitimate financial commitment to him from Dinkytown athletes to help make that possible. And that's coming from fans who support Dinkytown athletes and designating men's hockey as their beneficiary. And that is a factor that came up with him deciding to come back. And I think it's important for Minnesota to be able to have some money to retain players, because that can make a big difference whether or not you get to a Frozen Four or not. Whether you have a chance to get to a title game or not is retaining players like that for that extra year.
I mean, look at a player like Connor Kurth, right? Where he didn't sign an NHL deal, he signed a PTO. It's like, okay, well, what happens if we've got a little extra money in the kitty and we can have a Connor Kurth on the team? Do you think that would change the dynamic? I mean, when you look over my shoulder here, this national championship team, we didn't lose a single guy. We had Jordan Leopold stay. We had Paul Martin there. We had Johnny Pohl, Jeff Tafe, right? We had all these guys that chose to stay, right? And having a team that's a little older, a little more senior, that's been there, done that, credit is huge. And I think if we have players like that and we're able to incentivize them to stay an extra year or two, that's an extra, arrow in the quiver for Bob to shoot.
Viggs, you got to hand it to Mr. Connor Kurth, though. Graduating in 3 years while playing a D1 sport is not easy. So hats off to him just for doing that.
Yep, he's a heck of a player for Minnesota. He decided to move on, but he's got that degree in hand, and that goes
Which
a
is
long way
great.
for those guys. Yep, you like to see that.
Yeah, the landscape's so crazy, though. I mean, you got the major juniors issue right now.
Oh, gosh.
Where, suddenly they're allowed to come in. The other thing that's not really being talked about a lot is what's going to happen with the NHL collective bargaining agreement and how the free agency rights are going to be changed. I mean, previously there's been a difference between major juniors and what their free agency rights would be. In other words, when a team loses their draft rights, versus how that rule was applied to college hockey. And the earlier reports have said that they're going to merge it into one big rule. And I think it was like age 22. So when a kid turns age 22, is what I read, at least at one point, the team would lose their draft rights. So if you draft them at age 18, they spend 2 years in the USHL or in major juniors, suddenly they're 20 years old, they arrive on campus at Minnesota. We only get them for a year because the school is not going to want to wait, or an NHL team is not going to want to wait and risk losing them to free agency the following year.
How's that going to work out, Feeks? I know you kind of follow the NHL a little more than most of us, but
yeah, I mean, because they don't want to have that loophole where players can go into college and become free agent. The Blake Wheeler loophole that they can earn by playing those extra years. I still think it's going to shake out to where most players, by the time they would be a senior in school, if they finish that year and they go into that next fall unsigned, they could be a free agent. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of NHL teams are going to want to have players after that junior year of eligibility sign that summer, so they don't have to go through that risk of that next year where they would lose them. And I think that's ultimately how it's going to shake out with these CHL players. They'll get 3 years before they would have a threat of being a free agent.
I had heard it might move up a bit, like a couple months. Like instead of August, it might be May or April.
But the NHL teams aren't going to want to let players go back for that year and risk that time, whether it's August, July, June. It's not going to matter. They don't want to go through that issue of having a player play a season, and then when that season ends, the next one's a free agent. They're not going to want that.
Okay. How are you feeling about this team right now? August 12th, Viggs. I really like some of the guys that are coming in after seeing them at the World Junior Showcase. LJ Mooney. Okay, LJ Mooney up to your shoulder. And then Jacob Rombach looking down at you. If anyone hasn't seen those our interviews with them at the World Junior Showcase, you must see them just to see how Viggs is looking up and then looking way down. It was quite the combination there, Viggs.
Yeah, the World Juniors Summer Showcase was great for us, getting all that access to the players.
Yes.
Dave Fisher from USA Hockey was great to work with as he set that process up. I think the Gophers are going to be in better shape than a lot of fans are expecting for next year. We've often talked about how Motzko's wanted to get this roster older and more experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe they're not quite as old, but they're definitely experienced. A lot of these players have all played 2-3 years of juniors as they come in. They've had guys like Beckett Hendrickson delay his enrollment and play that extra year of junior before he comes in. Javon Moore, same process. He delayed his enrollment after the program, played a year of junior, comes in more experienced. And I think the transfer portal, adding guys like Pritchard and Lucky, are going to help Minnesota, providing a little bit more experience and depth. I think Lucky's going to be moving back to center for Minnesota this year. That's really important for the Gophers. As you look at hockey teams, strength down the middle, super important. Having centers who can win draws, who control the center of the ice, defensemen who can protect the net, and good goaltending. And the Gophers are solid in all those areas. You look at their blue line core, Cal Thomas and Luke Middleset and Leo Gruba, that's a pretty good starting point for a blue line core. And then you started adding guys like Whipple and Rombach to that crew. They're going to be big and experienced and heavy back there. And I think one thing you look at with this coaching staff is they've really emphasized size over the years, putting these classes together. And this is going to be one of the biggest Gopher hockey teams we've seen in a while. And when you have a team like that, you can take a guy like LJ Mooney, who can totally change the pace of play on the ice. And we saw that time and time again during the showcase. And he's going to be adding that to this lineup this year. And I actually think, maybe some of the talent that has moved on to pro hockey is going to be missed. But I actually think this power play this year has a chance to be better, just based on the creativity that they have coming back and the workers they have that can win second chances on the power play. So I think it's an optimistic year for Gopher hockey.
Yeah, we saw Mooney on the power play and penalty kill Vigs during this showcase. So, and we saw him taking faceoffs too. So, pretty versatile. So, 51 days till the season gets started. Let's go. Golden Helmet Collected. Let's get that going too, man. Come on, guys. Let's go.
Yeah, we are going.
I know so many people are saying, I want to work with them. I want to volunteer for them and helping out. And, if it's getting more people on or PR or all this other stuff, you'd be surprised how people are very excited about this.
Yeah, it's something that we've seen. I don't want to say I was hesitant, but you launch something and you're like, okay, is this going to work? I know clearly I'm a Gopher fan.
Yeah.
So, and you kind of wonder, you're like, is this going to be real? And then when you kind of have that soft launch and people see a little bit about the logo and kind of your mission statement, and you see that people are as passionate as you are, and even more so, it's been great. The businesses that have lined up to work with us I called it heartwarming, and that is a great way to describe it. It's been awesome to see. And like I said, we're just trying to do it the right way. It's great to just launch something, but if you don't launch it the right way, then it doesn't really matter. But yeah, the businesses have been really impressive. The individuals, the 75 names. My email was just blowing up with people and extremely qualified. It wasn't like some 13-year-old kid that just likes editing videos here and there. These were business professionals that wanted to join, that were offering their services. When I think I was on spring break when Jupe, you and I were talking, and we were texting a little, and you need to talk to Eric Brever. And then, so we start talking about this, and it's like, hey, there's an opportunity to do something special that's almost like kind of grassroots, community driven, that people can be proud of. And I think we can be incredibly complementary to the existing NIL ecosystem that's out there already. And when we come to market, I think it's going to be really beneficial for kind of everybody, not just the players, but the people that get to feel like they're part of something, that they contribute to the success of this program.
And Eric, I think that's kind of one of the keys, is that everyone's coming together. We're using connections. You've been on GPL for 20 years as a member, and you and I we've known each other for quite a long time. Getting people together, using our connections, my connection to Nick and connection to you, and then connection to other people, and people wanting to do all this. This really can be like a family type of collective.
Yeah, and that's as Nick said, it's heartwarming. It's so cool putting all of us Gopher fans in a room and all of us getting us together. And that's really what it's supposed to be, is collective for the student athletes by the community itself. We really wanted to see it in that way, in its purest sense. It's the ultimate in fan club, right? We really want to put this together as a giant fan club, that grassroots feeling of saying we're going to support Gopher hockey together, because it brings a lot of joy to us.
Well, it's very exciting. I can't wait till you guys officially launch. Obviously, it's going to take a little time. Obviously, you got to still so many legal and BS things out there for you to deal with. But Nick and Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show, for coming on our summer show. Can you stay around for a little bit of overtime?
I can, if you let me give one quick pitch. If you are a business that wants to work with Golden Helmet Collective, we would love to hear from you. info@goldenhelmetcollective.com. Reach out to us. We would love to speak with you. We've got a lot of different opportunities. We've spoken with a lot of different businesses. We want to make sure it's a great fit. Or
send a DM to the X account, or your X account, or anything, or Brever's X account, or any of these people. Reach out. They'll get. That's what the family thing is. We know people to get.
Or if you work for a business that you think, God, this would be great, talk to the business owner, talk to the CEO, talk to the manager, right? Have them reach out to us. That's literally what happened with one of our big opportunities that's come through. It was just a random email, and Eric and I sat on the Zoom call with these gentlemen, and they were rabid Gopher hockey fans. The guy had boards like from the Frozen Four, sticks on the ceilings. And I mean, I texted Eric while we were on the Zoom. I'm like, this is so awesome. It was so cool, right? Because, you're like, hey, we're just launching this little thing. And then you have this huge business reach out to you and say, you know what? We love what you're doing. We love the passion, and we want to be part of that in any way that we can. It wasn't like, hey, we want to do this and we're going to like grind you down and you're not going to make much on the deal. It was, how can we help? What do we need to do? And it's, like I said, the heartwarming. It's the best way to describe it.
Well, we appreciate you both coming on. Vigo, I want to give you the last word here. Anything we should be looking for before the season starts for Gopher hockey?
I think the biggest thing to watch for Gopher hockey coming into camp here is once they start practicing, I'll be on social media. I'll be on Gopher Puck Live, starting to put together who's playing with who's playing center. Because as we see this group together, it's going to be a fun group to watch the Gopher coaching staff put together. I think this is going to be a good year for them.
That's just great. Well, that's going to do it for our summer GPL podcast. We'll be back early October, I want to say, for season number 15 of the show. For those of you watching live on YouTube or X, stay tuned for overtime. For the rest of you, we'll catch you in the fall. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and get notified each time we go live or post a video. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate our show and leave a review. All right. It's been a little while, but of course, look at this. He's ready for the beer of the week. What do we got, Vigs?
So we got a little consecration from Russian River Brewing Company out in Santa Rosa. It's a ale aged in cab soft barrels with black currants. Very fancy.
Ooh. Let's see its color. Let's see this color, baby.
Won't be black as the night, but it's summer. It's a little bit lighter.
Yeah, that does look a little light for you. But like you said, yeah, it's summer. Look at that pour.
This one.
Cheers, Vigs.
Cheers, GPL.
All right. How do we get all messed up here?
Very good.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Look at that.
Little Northeast from
the Northeaster.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw this earlier.
Shells, Grain Belt, Northeast. I'm jealous. I just drank the last of mine right now. So I am sans beer right now.
What was Nick's DJ name at Grandma's Saloon?
I honestly, I kind of just played whatever anybody wanted to hear. It was, you kind of had to know the crowd, right? Like, so.
DJ Angel.
Yeah, me like, yes. Just spitting.
Oh boy.
No, it was a great gig. I started out as a bar back there, and I started bartending, and then I did some security, and then one day the DJ didn't show up, and you need music, so they're like, "Hey, get up there and do it." And I just kind of had some fun with it, and yeah.
Okay, I see Vonner with another thing. Will they score a shootout goal this year? I'm betting not. I will bet against that.
I will take that on $100, please.
I think LJ Mooney has got the hands and the ability to convert a shootout goal. But if you don't go to overtime and you don't need shootouts because the Gophers are going to win all their games in reg, you don't have to worry about it.
So during the World Junior Summer Showcase, I got a text from a certain video coach who was out with a bunch of other coaches. It was a message on X saying, well, "What's the count up to? What is it? The guys I'm with don't believe me." And I'm like, it's unfortunately like 27 or 28, whatever I said at the time, and sent them to it. He needed that proof to tell. I'm guessing. What's the BC coach's name? Greg Brown.
Greg Brown.
I believe he wanted to tell Greg Brown that, it in fact it is a real number and a real stat that they missed like 27.
I mean, I can't talk. It's not like anybody ever picked me to go do a shootout. So,
but it wasn't a thing then either.
The streak is 28.
28.
Right,
there you go.
According to our Go for Puck Live shootout history page.
It's actually kind of impressive.
Oh, it's a great stat. It's a total great stat.
And they keep going to the NCAA tournament, even without the OT shootout wins. So that's what really matters around here.
Yeah.
You know, you miss the NCAA tournament, you get fired. Keep making it, you're fine.
So is this the R-rated version? This is where I can really let my
wasn't this where you did the Western story?
Hey, I didn't bring it up.
Leo did.
Leo might have.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of out there, and you kind of got to put a cherry on top of it, right? So.
I don't use it as an intro video. I would like to, but it just really wouldn't go.
A little too wild for our usual listeners.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was funny to be there. But I will say, we did have a really good alumni golf outing. We also had 140 guys out there. Chatted with a lot of the guys about Golden Helmet, and I mean, every one of the guys was just like ravenously supportive of it. So yeah, we will see how it goes with those guys. And I mean, I've had a ton of guys that have just volunteered. They're like, hey, what can I do? How can I help? And these are, pretty known names, right? And guys that are in the NHL right now. Hey, how can I help? What can we do? Do you need my image? Can I take some pictures with some Golden Helmet jerseys and apparel, and just to kind of spread the word. So it's been awesome.
It certainly feels like it's some of the schools that have had NIL opportunities. It's been the NHL alums who've really kickstarted things for them.
Yeah.
Do you sense that there's that kind of commitment from the people you've talked to get things going?
Yeah, I mean, I think, how do I want to answer this? Even though we're on the overtime, it's still recorded. Yeah, I do think there is kind of that impetus to start getting things going, right? The bar has been set with some other schools, and I think a lot of the alums are aware of that. And I think they just need that vehicle to kind of implement that call to action, where right now there's not really that vehicle for them to do that in a significant way. And hopefully we can be that vehicle for them.
Yeah, I think it's tricky in college athletics right now because with the House settlement money, instead of thinking, okay, how are we going to spend this new Big Ten TV contract money? Now it's like, oh my God, we still have a $10 million shortfall in our budget for next year that Mark Coyle presented to the regions. And the regions basically just like took that budget and they went, okay, we'll trust you, Mark. But if you do this again next year, there's probably going to be problems. And so I think you've got institutions who are weighing with that problem and then also trying to figure out how to get more money. So I think, as an institution, it's difficult for them to figure out how much do we need through the Golden Gopher Fund and how much can we steer towards Dinkytown and Golden Helmet.
Yeah, and I think it would be, I mean, like, here's just a pie in the sky, nothing is set in stone. It's like, all right, well, what happens if we have, let's say we have 25, 26 NHL alums that are currently on one-way contracts. What happens if each one of those guys gives $10,000 and that money goes to the players? Now, every one of those kids, we've got 26 kids, that would be $10,000 that each one of those kids would get. And I think the kids would, and you got to talk to the NHL guys and just say, listen, like that you won't ever receive anything back from this, but you're going to start something, a tradition that will get passed down, and you will pay it forward. And as time goes on, guys will start paying it back, right? You received that stipend from the NHL guys that were committed to the University of Minnesota. I think that would be something really cool. Just pie in the sky, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. Nothing's been moved on with that, but I just thought that would be an amazing idea. And I know there has been some receptivity with that. So,
yeah, but even then, we still have to find those activations to be able to pay that money out. We can't just give a stipend anymore. And that's the complicating factor is, and I'll say this, and Nick, we had this conversation with Jeremiah Carter. Gone are the days when a student athlete would jump at easy money to show up, just to get a check essentially. He talked about having to sell plasma to get his food for that week. And here's a D1, a pretty good D1 athlete at that in Jeremiah. But, now the student athletes, if it's for less than $500, getting him out of bed is a tough deal. So it's really an issue of, and probably a generational issue to a certain extent. How do we motivate them to say, hey, this is worth your while. We can do some of these things. You show up at these particular places, and suddenly you're going to find yourself $10,000 richer. We'd have to create those events to be able to funnel that money to them. So that's going to be part of the logistical challenge that we're going to have to figure out is how do we have that activation in place, for these student athletes.
Does NIL money have to be for the players?
Well, and that's a good question.
What I'm really getting at is could you use some of the money to say they want this brand new, the skate sharpener thing we've been talking about in the past? I mean, could you put a collective?
I did hear they are getting the skate sharpener, by the way. I did hear that.
but you see what I mean? It's hey, we need $20,000 for a skate sharpener, whatever it is. I don't know what it costs, but I'm just saying, could Golden Helmet be used for something like that?
One of the things we thought of is, why don't we fill up the scholarship bucket?
Okay.
So, can we fill up the scholarship bucket? And in other words, we bring in money, we turn around, hand to the University of Minnesota and say, give this to hockey scholarships. So that there's not just 18 anymore, there's 26. And that's where this $2.5 million cap comes in. The first $2.5 million of those new scholarships counts against your NIL dollars. So the university is we don't want it right now, but we're also thinking this $2.5 million cap is going to go away in the near future. When that happens, we would love you to do that, to fundraise for those monies so we can fill up the full 26 and all of our students, are on scholarship at that point. And that way they can still have NIL dollars, NIL activations beyond that point, but we'd fundraise for scholarships first. I suppose there's a possibility of doing it outside of the university, but that's subject to all sorts of rules and regs that, I don't know if we really want to get ourselves into, but that's on our mind. And I think the university would love to engage in those discussions with us.
Okay.
I do think it's going to be interesting to see how this, pay for something rather than just the pay for play works, because you have these collectives and these other institutions that are going to have so much money, they're going to have a hard time getting it out there. Is this going to hold up, or is it just going to change in a couple weeks again, where, there is almost like a cap that comes from the collectives that could be just opened up,
Yeah, I think some are calling it a soft cap. You've got your $21.5 million salary cap from the university itself, but then there's a soft cap beyond that. These collectives could probably provide. They just have to justify that this is actually for a real activation, versus, hey, this is for sitting on the sidelines as a Texas football player.
I mean, personally, and Eric and I, we've chatted about this. We are so interested to see what is going to be approved. I remember when we were sitting with Jeremiah, I said, well, what's the going rate? And it was kind of like a, we will see kind of thing, right? Because they don't know, right? And and then you saw basically once collectives started using NIL Go, they started declining all of the collective activations out there. And then they came out with the ruling saying, okay, collectives are essentially banned according to us. And now they've pushed it back. So I think, to our point, which we've made abundantly clear is like, we will know so much more shortly, hopefully, as it kind of gets fleshed out. Because like I said, we're not in a race to launch. We're in a race to understand the environment that we are going to be working in so that we can launch in a really effective way.
Gotcha.
It's almost like I always think like a keyboard or a soundboard, right? Where you like move one dial and then like 10 other dials move because you moved that one dial. That is so much of what like the collective is. Like, it's not like 2 or 3 pieces. It's like 15 and they're all like tied together. So if you move one up one way, it's the counterbalances are pretty incredible. And then it's like, okay, well, what about this from NIL Go? And then, well, what about the cap? And then what about Title IX? And like, so it really, it is pretty dynamic where, I mean, we just have some jam sessions when we talk about like, if then what happens, so it's unique. And even the players are calling us to ask, right? Because these guys, they want to do what's right. They want to follow the rules. They want to check the boxes. And right now it's just kind of a question of like, people don't even know what the boxes are you need to check, right?
This McKenna stuff is really interesting, and Nick and I have had a jam session on this one particularly, and nobody at the U or even through Big Ten circles, as I understand, has confirmed the dollar amount he's receiving. Mm-hmm. But if Penn State was to offer their entire NIL allocation to him, given the ballparks that we know, maybe they're promising him 4 years worth of NIL allocation. That's possible. Could they guarantee it? They're not supposed to under the House settlement rules, but they could loosely guarantee it. Here's another aspect that I think is quite interesting too. Who is the major donor to Penn State?
Pegula.
Jared Pegula.
And what does he own?
The Buffalo Sabres.
So he has an NHL team in his pocket. Might there be something that he could say, hey, why don't you just hold off on free agency, stay there through your draft rights and become a Sabre when we're all done at Penn State? Make it worth your while.
Or could he say, all right, because everybody has said, hey, it's the total package value, which is kind of what they've always put out there, is $700,000. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We're just speculating, right? Well, what happens if, let's say Penn State's similar to the U and they got 200,000 or 300,000? Okay. What happens if they give them 175 grand for 1 year? And Pegula says, you know what? It's kind of like a pro team for me. And shit, if I had this guy as a first round draft choice, I'd probably pay him $700,000 or $800,000. So we'll give him the 175 for a year. And if he blows out, you know what? I'll just cover the rest, write him a check. He's out of the university. I'm just saying, maybe that works. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. We got to ask the lawyers,
Well, again, it's not technically supposed to work, but
yeah, it is the Wild West, because I mean, once you're out of the university system, like, that's just a little side deal, right? Who knows, right? I'm just speculating, and I'm probably way off. Maybe he's making way less. Maybe he's making way more. But I mean, it's difficult for us to understand how that deal works, given the boxes that need to be checked that we understand and know about right now. That's where you got to almost really think outside the box to come up with that number, which has been circulated. And agents are viciously guilty of inflating these numbers, like really vicious. I mean, I've asked different student athletes at the U, some of the other college players. I'm like, hey, what'd you get from your collective? One of them told me $70. So, and this was a pretty good player. So it's like, I think, for some student athletes, it's pretty extreme as to the amount of money they get. I know I took an NIL certification course, and I think for the average activation for a social media post was like, my numbers are a little off. I'm just using it as an example. It was like $1,000, which is pretty expensive for a tweet or a social media post. That was the average, but the median was like $50, right? So like, obviously what that tells you is like, there are some incredible outliers that are skewing that number, right? Your Shadou Sanders, your Livy Dunn, et cetera. So it is so wild. Like that's where it's like, can we just flesh this out and we can get the rules, and then once we get the rules, then we can play by those, and we knock the hide off the ball.
It is good to be in the Big Ten, though. I mean, Jeremiah is doing a phenomenal job. It is the impossible job that he has, and he's doing a great job of it. But all the schools in the Big Ten, they're talking to each other. They're trying to stay in compliance with one another. They don't want the Big Ten to look bad in any fashion. So there's real consideration about the school's image and the Big Ten's image in their conversations. It's good to be in a Power 2 conference, really, particularly. From what I can tell about, say, St. Cloud State, they don't have the same infrastructure in place, to be able to build what they have. So they're not even the same playing field. And here's an NCHC, a pretty good NCHC squad perennially. There's just no way that with this arms race going on, even good NCHC schools will be able to compete with this, just because of how this is going. And the other piece that I think is interesting too is that if the Big Ten, if this cycles back around where these other schools are able to offer more scholarships or are using their salary cap monies toward hockey and not toward the Big Ten being prohibited to doing so because they're funding football and basketball as their first sports, how long is the Big Ten hockey group going to allow that? If they just say, you know what, we're done. We're not going to continue playing in this because this is not a level playing field in men's college hockey anymore. And we're the ones at the negative. We're out. We're just not going to compete in the NCAA tournament. We'll just have a Big Ten tournament, keep all the money ourselves, split it among the member schools, and see ya.
Viggs, we've known that, the U has made good money at hockey for a long time, but that doesn't get reinvested very much. It goes into a general fund. And and hockey makes money is kind of what we always hear. It's always football, basketball, and hockey.
Well, essentially, the Big Ten TV contract funds most of the athletic department. There's a lot of shell games that are being done in the financial reporting at institutions like Minnesota. Obviously, the ticket sales for men's hockey is very strong. It's usually 4.5 to 6.5 a year. And that funds hockey, and it probably funds women's hockey as well based on those numbers. But the big picture of the budget is reliant on that college football and then the men's basketball tournament money that comes into the institution. And like Brever said, it's very good to be a part of the Big Ten. It solves a lot of problems.
But maybe that's a good question. Something you mentioned, women's hockey, and we should cover that because we have had that question like, oh, is this for women's hockey as well with the golden helmet, or is this just men's hockey? And I think, it's kind of the elephant in the room. It's like, yeah, we should talk about that. And we did talk about that as like, okay, are we going to do this for women's hockey as well? And we just said, listen, I think that what I know is men's hockey, right? I'm not doing this for men's basketball or football. We're doing this for men's hockey because that's where my passion lies. But we also think that the fan of men's hockey is different than the fan of women's hockey, right? So, if that's something that, they feel that they need another leg up, they should probably start their own collective if and when that happens. But that's something we've thought about, and we thought a lot about, and it was just like, okay, what do I know? I know the landscape of men's hockey. That's where my passion lies. And that's one of the things that we've had some questions on that. But we just felt in the end that there was the sports fan that goes to the women's game is different than the fan that goes to the men's hockey game.
Yeah, and I think on that point, I think our idea was to set up an infrastructure that we could duplicate for a different sport, and women's hockey be a natural kind of complement to the men's hockey program. I've talked to a couple of the alumni who I know from the hockey circles here, and kind of told them, hey, if this works, I'm going to package it up in a box, create it for you, and then you guys can take it for the women's side. So that's sort of a future endeavor. If we are as successful as we hope, that it would be duplicated in the women's side, for example.
Yeah, it was similar to what we've done with our Gopher hockey alumni for the men. Like, well, these are our alumni, and then you should definitely, we can package it up. We can help you do that as well for the women's side of things. But I know we have had some questions on that, so it's kind of good to put that out there as well.
Viggs, as part of this budgeting thing, the sports department needs to fund $20.5 million each year now. Whether it's coming through,
it's going to go up too.
Yeah, it's going to go up, but they have to fund this each year, which means part 2 of updating Mariucci is different. A look at a new Williams Arena, money that they were profiting all of a sudden, is gone there. And like you said, was a $10 million deficit for the next year. So yes, it's great for the Big Ten, Eric, but Vigs, it does hurt them in quite a few areas.
Well, I mean, if you're going to stay in the Big Ten and run all these sports, you got to be in. Like, you can't just have one foot in, 1 foot out, and you've got to invest the money in these programs to be successful. Because if you don't, you look at what's happened to men's basketball the last couple of years. They are in a bit of a red hole of financials, not selling tickets and not making the tournament and not being able to get the fundraising for men's basketball, and it's become an issue in the budget. You look at women's basketball, same issue. Like, they're starting to hemorrhage money in those programs right now. And so Mark Coyle is trying to solve that hole in the dike and hire some new coaches and invest in those programs. And when the House settlement came in, no longer is the new Williams Arena on the docket. They had done the studies to figure out, do they want to renovate? They want to build something new. Now that you have this line item, you're not going to be able to do that. And just budgeting at the university, big picture, is a problem right now. So it's very uncertain. I think it's definitely going to be a year by year kind of thing. I know the TV revenue is supposed to come up in future years that'll fix this gap in the budget. There could be performance by the Big Ten in the college football playoff that could solve this hole a little bit. If Ben Johnson's departure and Nico Medved's implementation solves the tickets there for men's basketball, maybe that closes a little bit of the gap in the budget picture, but it's definitely uncertain right now as university athletics as a whole.
It's almost it's not just the University of Minnesota. I mean, if you look at Big Ten, I think UCLA was ran a deficit, their athletic department, of like 30 million. I think Michigan State was like 16. Ohio State was like almost 40 million. So this is not unique to the University of Minnesota. But you see this a lot through college sports now, when this has become a business, right? And I think the question a lot of universities are asking themselves are, okay, we might run a deficit and that might be a loss leader, but is it additive to the culture, things that we can't necessarily measure just simply by what's in the athletic budget?
Well, you talked to officials at North Dakota when they won the national title, their applications went up. No longer do they have an enrollment issue there. They had plenty of students wanting to come there. So, a lot of institutions look at the front porch, fundraising, connection, part of being the school, and it's important. And if you look at the budgeting for athletics, it's pretty self-sufficient, but they also write checks to the campus for tuition, for F&A spending, facilities administration. Those are dollars that are going from athletics back to campus, and it's probably around $30 to $40 million that's going out. So some of this institutional funding, like these athletic fees that we talked about earlier, are coming back. And it's not like it's funding the athletic department like it is at some of the group of 5 schools. These big power institutions, most of their money is going out into the institution rather than going in. So while you're moving some shells around to balance it a little bit, it's not like athletics is being subsidized completely, because they are still paying campus quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and you think about, some departments are in other schools might be revenue toward the athletic department, and Minnesota is not. So like parking fees, parking and transportation, I'm assuming the different department altogether. At Wisconsin, that money may come to the athletic department, but at Minnesota, that money goes to a different department. It's never credited toward the athletic budget itself. But think of all the game days you have for football and basketball and volleyball and men's, women's hockey. That's money the athletic department never sees, because it all just shifts over to parking and transportation.
Exactly. There's lots of cases like that in the budgeting.
Parking is not free for Gopher games.
Unless you want to walk a long way.
Yeah.
Viggs will walk home, won't you? Haven't you walked?
I've done that before. I live within walking distance, so I can do it on a nice day. So
Not in the dead of winter. That could be a little brutal.
that would be brutal. But those 5 o'clock starts on Saturdays make it easier. So it's going to be good for your 7-year-old, Nick.
It allows us to also go out too, and then be ready to go home at 10:30 instead of 12:30.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm waiting for that new schedule. You know, I know the Big Ten got to do their thing, right? You know, so
Still gonna have to wait.
I'm kind of like, all right, when are we gonna do this thing? All right, let's figure it out here. I'd like to make my
It's
schedule.
been the last week of August, last couple of years, and I have a feeling it's going to be again. And
Well, it's funny because one of the things we like to we do a alumni tailgate at a football game, and we kind of provide food and beverages for all of our alums. They bring their kids and stuff, but you always kind of want to we've got the football schedule, but you also want it far enough away from the start of the hockey season and not too close that it interferes with things. So we're just kind of sitting here waiting for that schedule to come out. So we will see. I know there's a lot of moving parts with it. So you got something back there, or are you just mixing another drink?
it's going to happen when I'm a
I thought Veets had a schedule back there for me. It was grabbing it.
No.
Wild turkey.
So I one of my off-season things, I got to go down to Kentucky and pick some barrels of rye and bourbon. This is the first one to come back. This is our single barrel private selection from Russell's. It's like a 7-year rye, essentially. It's at 1010 Washington Wine Spirits. Heather Kremenet's still there. We also have a Stag barrel coming in a couple weeks. Another Russell's bourbon and a Heaven Hill Larceny barrel proof. So,
wow.
Cheers.
Skål. Cheers. Nastarovia.
Nastarovia.
All the different languages. Skål is the main one. Oh,
yeah.
By the way, I should mention you guys went to the that summer. I forget what the name was with all the
World Junior Summer Showcase.
Yeah, one of my buddies' kids, I actually didn't even realize it, from Sweden, was playing on the Swedish national team. Herman Lev, the young goalie. I knew his dad. I played with his dad. Unfortunately, his dad was on that plane that crashed with Lokomotiv Yaroslavl. Did we lose
a former Wild player with that too?
What was it? I'm forgetting his name, but yeah, I had two buddies on that, Yukin and Stefan Lev. And Stefan had actually, I'd played the year before and another team, but all the import players, we always kind of hung out together and we were all in group texts. And he was trying to get me to come to his team in Yaroslav. And I said, I don't care what you're going to pay me. He said, hey, we'll give you a 50% pay raise. I said, I'm going to take a 50% pay cut and go to Berlin. And if I wouldn't have been on that team, I probably wouldn't be here. Or I would have been on that team, I wouldn't be here right now. I still have the contract offer in my old Hotmail account. So that's how you know I'm old. I still have a Hotmail account. But yeah, it was awesome to see. He looks like just a younger version of Stefan. So I didn't get a chance to talk to him. I would have went to the games if I would have known he was there, and I'm sure his mom was there, Anna. So I reached out to her when I saw that he was there, and I heard he did pretty well. So
a lot of people were there, Viggs. We had a 5-10 minute talk with Mike Hastings out of Wisconsin, and you guys were talking about a little bit about how refs are treated, how parents are out there, how tough it is in youth leagues, and being a coach yourself. It was a pretty good discussion with Hastings.
Yeah, Hastings was good. David Carl was there. Scott Sandelin.
Keith Kachuk was there.
Chris Mayott was there. It was kind of a who's who of college hockey on campus, which is fun to see. I hope that USA Hockey considers doing the camp in Minneapolis at Mary Jane Ritter in the future. I think it was a really fun opportunity to see everyone, and there's lots of scouts in the building for that weekend, and probably a great showcase for Minnesota. I know official visits started August 1st. A lot of their recruits did their unofficials the week before. before things really ramped up with the camp. And I think that's why you saw so many commits to Minnesota that first week of the new signing or the announcing period. So fun time to be on campus.
Well, what a great way to show players your facilities, especially for some of the international kids. We always used to recruit Minnesota kids, but now it's, we've kind of branched out, right? I mean, what an amazing showcase to say, hey, look, here's our 10,000 seat arena, our NHL style locker room, our weight room that's second to none. Amazing facilities. And I've played in Europe, and for a lot of these kids, especially like in Sweden, where I kind of spent a majority of my career, like the facilities are nothing like they are at the University of Minnesota. And these are fully professional teams. I'm sure those kids were pretty impressed, and I think they were just using Mariucci as the place to kick the soccer ball around a little bit, and look around that arena, which is probably nicer than most of the arenas they've ever played in outside of some of the international competitions.
Well, one of the stories I heard was that the Canadians kind of showed up a little later, and they went straight into Ritter because that's where their locker rooms were. And when they were talking with a few people, they said, "Oh, this is such a nice facility. This is a great little 3,500 seat arena. This is a great place. It's great you play hockey here." And he's like, "This isn't the main arena." And he took them over to see Mariucci's house, this gigantic place. And they're like, "Oh, this is not what I thought. This is a much bigger deal." And Jess was talking about Jess Myers Vigs. Michigan might be thinking about either redoing Yost or building something new, and they like how the Mariucci Ritter complex is built. They might want to add a women's team and build something similar to Mariucci with another rink attached to it. Kind of like what Wisconsin's done a little bit, a little bigger with LeBron and everything else, but they like the Mariucci Ritter kind of setup.
Yeah, it's a great setup for a thing like this to have two rinks, have them connected underneath, share some locker room, strength and condition areas, shooting room, things like that. I think one of the things that's really going to be evident over the next couple of years is how much funding college hockey gets. When Nick's talking about going to the alumni golf tournament and talking to guys about kicking back to the program and paying it forward, I don't think you have those same discussions in Portland and London and Oshawa and, Lethbridge. I don't think there's that same support. Those guys maybe go back to those towns. They're like, I'm going to buy this team and make money, like Dale Hunter's doing in London. I think, you look at what's happening in college hockey, the eyes are open for these CHL players to say, that's a great next step that's going to be better than the CHL. And it's probably going to make me a better pro by getting that experience against older players. And I think we're just starting to see, a little glimpse of what's going to be happening in the next couple of years. You look at some of the Gopher commitments, Kwasnicka, he's going to go out to Penticton. Maceo Phillips is going to be in Green Bay, but he was rumored to go out to Portland for a little while. I think you're going to see some of that stuff start to happen where guys play CHL and then they come to college hockey.
Going to be
facilities are pretty sweet.
Speaking of another tall guy, Maceo Phillips is also huge. Wow. He was at Benilde, and I coached against him with New Prague, and I'm standing on our bench, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's taller than I am, and I'm standing on the bench. Holy cow.
I've seen some of the guys in the weight room. When I went in and talked to Bob a little bit about the Golden Helmet Collective, and I went in to go see Cal, and I was looking at some of these guys, and I'm like, Jesus, these guys are jacked and they're huge. As a guy that was kind of an undersized D-man at under 5'11" and 3/4,
on skates.
Yeah, on skates a little taller.
I'll give you a hard time.
I remember when we did the NHL kind of heights and weights and stuff, and as soon as they were 5'11" and 3/4, the phone stopped ringing, and there was no more interest, because it was when I played, it was back in the day where if you were under 6 foot defenseman, you better be like Bobby Orr and Ray Bork out there, just moving and scooting. Other than that, they want a guy that's Darian Hatcher, 6'5", Craig Ludwig, huge shin pads, just boxing guys out and dropping the mitts on guys. The game had changed. They still had 2-line pass rule. It's funny to actually explain that to young kids, like what the 2-line pass rule is. And they're like, what? So I remember going to Europe. Like, I was used to the 2-line pass rule because we had it in pros when I first went. And then it was like, I was giving up breakaways left and right because they didn't have it, so it was a big change.
Oh,
Nick, who won the alumni golf tournament, by the way? Do you remember?
Honestly, I can't even remember. It got a little hazy there for me.
I bet it did.
You weren't in contention?
Honestly, I was the MC for it, and I think it was like 18 or 19 under, and we had like a 3-way tie. I mean, guys they're pretty good golfers. Most hockey guys are pretty good golfers. We did have a little bit of a debate because some teams had 4 guys, some guys had 5, and they wanted the extra shot and who's going to get it. And I mean, it's crazy. Like it was like a hooded sweatshirt for the winner, right? But like those guys didn't care. Like they wanted to win. Like, so I think next year, actually, I'm going to get a big trophy, and it's going to be like the Stanley Cup. I haven't even told the guys this, so hopefully, now you know. We're gonna
find the DQ cup. Find the DQ cup.
We're gonna get a big old trophy, or maybe like one of those like old like WWE wrestling belts or something that guys can take home or something for that. Because like, I mean, guys were kind of like chiseling each other a little bit for like shots, and you're like, well, he had an extra shot, and it's like, oh, come on, this is just for fun here, guys. But yeah, guys go hard out there.
My scramble tip to anyone who's got the moxie to get this going is you need to have your top 2 or 3 teams have a playoff in front of everybody to make sure there's no cheating. So the groups that have finished atop your leaderboard have to play in front of the entire crowd a playoff hole to determine who wins.
Oh, I like that. Well, I mean, the biggest issue we're having right now is we've grown this from it was like 60 or 70 guys the first year, and now we're at 140, which we're kind of maxed out at. So, we're actually talking about, okay, we're going to have like an 8 a.m. shotgun, and then there'll be like a 12:30 lunch for kind of everybody. And then we'll have another shotgun at like 1 o'clock or 1:30 to get the second group out, because it's just, we're running out of spots. And I was able to kind of squeak a couple people in there, and you run out of golf carts. It's like golf cart math, right? So if you let somebody have a 5-some, because you only have 74 golf carts, if you let it have 5-some, that just eats up an extra spot. But then it's like, if you put a 6-some, that's kind of like a slow round, and nobody wants to be out there for a 6 or 7 hour round. So it's like, you kind of like talk about moving those little dials around a little bit. We're doing it on the golf course.
First world problems. Jeez.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. You guys got anything else? It's only 9:30. I like this early time.
Yeah, and I just came back from California, clearly with the sunburn. So, it's only 7:30 for me.
Jeez.
West Coast time, but.
Yeah, I was in Oregon last week, so I had the same thing. The kids are the worst ones because they're still thinking, it's 9 at night. It's only 7 o'clock this time. Oh God, go to bed, please. Oh.
Did you get to Deschutes though and have some good beverages there?
Absolutely.
Did you get
I sent you a picture.
I know. Yeah. Did you get some Abyss? Anything special on tap there?
Black Butte Porter.
Okay.
That's bourbon.
That's their standard.
Yep. It was good. It was good. Solid. Yeah, I mean that whole. I mean, Bend is a cool town. It's just a great vibe in that place.
I'm more of a grain belt guy.
Yeah, I like that too. We went over to Eugene too, South University of Oregon. It's so weird to have University of Oregon in the Big Ten. By the way, that school is about the same size as Mankato, or UMD. It's weird having a school that size in the Big Ten.
With all the funding from Phil Knight that they get.
There it is.
There it is.
You are on it. Technological guru.
He's a good host.
I love it. It's like you're like studio. It's like you're like living in a lava lamp back there with all the lighting.
I have all the lighting. It changes colors. I can do what I want.
Oh my gosh.
It's fun. I get compliments on it too, from people at work whenever I'm on TV. They're like, "Oh, let's wait to see what colors you got today."
I kind of want to get those lights on your house where you get them like you can change the lights. So it's like, hey, the Vikings are playing. All right.
I had this.
Go purple.
My wife hated it. So I had that up, and she's like, "It looks cheesy."
Valentine's Day, we could put some pink stuff and red.
I tried. She was not a fan. Not a fan.
Yeah. I'm just tired of putting up Christmas lights. I fell off the ladder last year. So.
Did you really?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was like 4 feet, but like I'm not 110 pounds, so like 4 feet when you're 240 pounds, like that hurts. So yeah, like literally we had the biggest half-assed Christmas decorations ever. Like I just started buying crap at Home Depot and just shoving it in the yard.
Put it on the yard display.
Yeah, nothing on the house. Like reindeer out in the front yard. That was it.
Turning it red now.
Oh my gosh.
Just having fun with it.
Mood lighting. I love it. I'm jealous. Maybe I need that. It's a lot of gray in here. So.
Well, I'm in here all day. So it's like, and then the big TV's over there.
So speaking of NIL dollars, we had a conversation with Jeremiah, and who again connected in the Big Ten circles. He seemed to indicate Michigan State was funded by about 1 or 2 people. Their whole NIL activities are 1 or 2 people.
Wow.
And this whole new collective or the new rules with the NIL Go are really going to kind of put a damper on what they were doing. So it'll be really interesting to see if they can be as successful going forward. I don't know, but this year they'll still be pretty good. But next year going forward, it'll be really interesting to see if they can keep it up.
It's going to be interesting just to see how, for example, Alabama, right? Like, or any SEC school, because, a lot of these collectives were involved in the recruiting, and it's like, okay, you have this transfer portal, and, maybe they did, or maybe they didn't talk to, a kid that was in the transfer portal and said, okay, we've got, I don't know, use an easy number. We've got $100,000 of our house money that we can give to you, but we do have a collective that can give you 150. Well, I mean, one thing that Eric and I talked about when they banned collectives, it's like, well, what happens if these players just say, you know what, screw it, I'm not going to go out on the field and play today, and you and your TV contract can just pound sand? I mean, how fast do you think the NCAA would retract stuff? When these kids have flipped schools, they've probably bought cars, they have an expectation of what they assume they're going to make, and it's like, well, no, we can't have collectives. It's just wild, right? You start playing the ifs, if this happens, what about that? And you just start like throwing stuff at the wall, and it could get just wild and crazy, right? So
I think UNLV had a quarterback who basically quit on the team because he wanted more money, and the coach said, well, I'm not budging, go find a new place to play. And like the team rallied around the coach, and they figured it out and finished their season, and that quarterback had to go elsewhere. So I think that stuff's already happening, and I don't.
Yeah.
Wild West.
What are these
Wild
collectives
West.
that? I mean, if hypothetically, let's say we raised $1 bazillion, how do we get it out there to them right now, right? Like if it's okay, it's $500 activations, under that. What are they going to approve? It's so many questions where it's going to be really interesting. Like I cannot wait for the seasons to start, for football to get going, and just learn from a lot of these collectives. Because when we call these collectives, especially for like the football and basketball collectives, and most schools just have one collective, because most schools typically just have football and basketball and maybe like a volleyball or something like that. University of Minnesota is a little more unique, right? Where we actually have a revenue producing sport out there, right? And there's a couple schools that have basketball or baseball that do pretty well. But to talk to those schools, and these collectives have been pretty open with us when I've spoken with them, because we're not competing for the NIL dollars, right? Especially it's like, okay, you call an SEC school, ACC, right? And, they're predominantly basketball and football. They're very like transparent. So I think it's going to be really interesting to have those conversations of like, okay, how are you checking those boxes with NIL Go to make sure that you are compliant with the university and with the rules that are put in place?
It's a mess.
It's a mess. It is.
It's just a mess.
Yeah, it is. I honestly, if I knew it was going to be this much of a pain in the butt, I don't know if we would have. Oh my god!
I'm just envisioning Ben Affleck from The Accountant 2 when he goes into like the pizza shop, and he's just like, "Well, how many large pizzas are you selling? Because your paper costs don't equate to you selling that many large pizzas. So clearly, you're money laundering." And I can't wait for that to happen in the NCAA with like Tennessee and.
Well, I think Florida State had that issue, didn't they? Their basketball coach was promising all sorts of money. It never materialized.
It never happened, yeah.
So
I heard that with a lot of Gopher basketball players who left chasing money. They never saw it.
Yeah.
They left thinking they were going to get more money, and it just didn't materialize.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole NIL money on that piece, and in terms of these activations, one of the things Nick and I talked about is we may have to develop a podcast just to funnel money for activations.
Yeah.
So those are things that we were kind of exploring and saying, how do we develop activations for these student athletes so we can give them some cash?
I mean, we've thrown so many things. We talked about, we're like, okay, once we get this thing up and rolling, what happens if we sell this whole thing to the players for $1 and then they just run it, right? Now that, like, I mean, because we're not in this to make any money, right? We're just trying to help these kids. So it's like, okay, and now they're co-owners of a collective that supports that. And each year when they leave, like, how does that work? If we ever did that dynamic, I mean, you can just start spinning it off in like crazy different ways. But I mean, everything's on the table right now.
Crazy. I was thinking, former players are going to get paid. So players within the last 5 or so years that may have been at Minnesota are going to get some money. Eric?
Yeah. So, I mean, they'll be part of the class action lawsuit, but I mean, hockey is not going to get a whole lot of money in general. I mean, football is going to get 75% of that fund of the $2 billion. Men's basketball would probably get 10 by itself, maybe 15%. Everybody else is going to split the remainder. So you figure all the Olympic sports, and I mean, Stanford's got water polo and horse jumping and the like. I mean, in theory, they're going to be able to participate in this too. How much is an archer worth at University of Chicago? Because they're entitled to compensation. I mean, so realistically, outside of football and men's basketball, it's peanuts for everybody else. So, But yeah, I mean, if you were an enterprising student person, and this is Livy Dunn is a great example of this, the sky is the limit in terms of what you can do. I mean, Paige Beckers is one of the most valuable, when she was a college student, was one of the most valuable NILers because she had cross-gender appeal. I mean, a post from hers was read by both men and women, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas, a quarterback at Texas, the guys will look at him, but the women aren't following what he's saying. So, from a marketer's perspective, there's a lot of value in the women student athletes. That's really unrealized. If you know what you're doing and want to build a brand as a female student athlete, you can really do well.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is everybody thinks football and basketball, and yeah, those are big pieces, but women's basketball has really exploded on the NIL standpoint, right? Especially with Caitlin Clark and what she's done over the last few years, right? And kind of bringing that to prominence. Women's volleyball has done an incredible job, especially like you look at the University of Minnesota, and I would say, we've talked a little bit about Dinkytown athletes. They've done a really good job with women's volleyball as well, and they have some external sources that are helping push some of those activations and some of the fundraising there. But it's everywhere people are competing for that entertainment dollar, and Gopher hockey is no different.
I feel like Dinkytown athletes just had their big barbecue a week or two ago that was paid for by their big, the financial company. I can't remember who.
Yeah, they did $1 million or something.
$1 million match campaign, and they sponsored that barbecue event for supporters of that. So
yeah,
I should know who that company is and give them a shout out.
Hey, Mote's got some good questions on YouTube, I think.
Which one?
Well, either one's fine.
Late to the party? We got any off-season dirt? Do we win a natty? Did PSU do college hockey a favor or ruin college hockey by raising the NIL bar?
I mean, you asked me which games I'm going to be at. I'm going to be at the Penn State game for sure. I want to see that kid play.
I think we'll see Chris Peters and Scott Wheeler and Corey Proman all at Mariucci for that one.
I was thinking about that earlier, Viggs. With their non-conference early schedule, I think Mr. McKenna could have quite a few points coming into Big Ten play.
If he doesn't have 25 points coming into the conference season, I'll be surprised.
The Big Ten's going to be really good this year again. I mean, the talent that's flowing in, I mean, the CHL arrivals and the like. I mean, the Gophers have a number of draft picks again. Michigan's reloading. Michigan State's scary good. Penn State's got what it's got. Wisconsin should be better than they've been. You can never count out Ohio State or Notre Dame. I mean, it's wow. It's going to be something else.
Students are going to be employees, aren't they?
You missed that one, but yeah.
No, I didn't miss it. It was just I had to scroll to the bottom there.
Yeah, I know. It's a good question. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but, I don't know that students want to be employees because suddenly that scholarship is now taxable to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they would lose that's now compensation to them. And that's going to be a problem for them per se. Schools obviously don't want them to be employees because then workers' comp becomes an issue, payroll taxes become an issue. You've got to comply with minimum wage and hours worked and overtime laws. I mean, it's an absolute mess and nightmare from a compliance perspective if you turn student athletes into employees. Everybody, I'll say this: everybody wants the union, though. I mean, union would be a good thing per se, because it gives you the ability of doing a collective bargaining agreement like the NHL has or the NFL has. That'd be awesome because then you can just create a rule. This is how it's going to work going forward, and this is what it's going to be. The problem is you can't do that unless they're employees. There's no contractual unionization ability before that happens. So that's kind of where this House lawsuit is really trying to create a union where none exists. Whether or not it's going to be truly enforceable is going to be a question.
Viggs, I'm curious, the women's team but gave another role to Jess Scott as a general manager, sort of running kind of, I don't know what her full role is going to be, but we obviously know her for many games against the Mud Hens. We played against her for quite a few years at the super rink, and now she's assistant coach over there at the U. Is Minnesota ever thinking about getting some kind of general manager for the men's team?
I certainly, from my perspective, the coaching staff is against that mindset right now. I don't feel like they see the need for it yet for them.
Okay.
Because if you look at Minnesota, they've got so many recruits that are close that they don't have to have someone on the road in Western Canada for an entire season. If there's a player out there who's interested in Minnesota, who's a top talent, they can just go see that individually and maintain that relationship that way. They don't have to have their finger on the pulse of the entire league with a full-time staff position. Obviously Ben Gordon, Steve Miller spend a lot of time on the road. Potter also spends a lot of time on the road, maintaining relationships with recruits and keeping their pulse in the leagues. But I don't think Minnesota feels the need where they have to spend a full-time staff position doing that like some of these other schools, because the draw to Minnesota is still pretty strong. You listen to these recruits talk about why they came into Minnesota. They basically say once that offer came, I wanted to be on board. That was the team for me. I just wanted that offer. And then I wanted to know that team wanted me and that staff wanted me. But they don't need to be out there all the time like some of these other schools maybe have to do it.
Okay.
I've talked pretty extensively with the staff, and I think we talked about like evolution of the game and this NIL space. I would say that they weren't first adopters to it, but I think they're really starting to see the opportunities out there now. And I had a conversation with one of the staff members, and I said, listen, do you think if NIL was available when Matthew Nyes and Logan Cooley came here, do you think you would have got him if you didn't have any NIL money and everybody else did? And I think that was a real good question to ask them. And I think they have like really started to adopt and start understanding the landscape of things are changing, right? And yeah, there is a cachet to play in the Big Ten, to play at the University of Minnesota. But in the end, if somebody's offering a big amount of money to another player, like that's going to weigh heavy, because when I played, like I wanted to wear that out. Like that was it for me, right? But now this is a business, and these student athletes are so much more professional than we ever were. When I would give the recruiting visits, I would tell mom and dad when they'd say, well, little Jimmy got promised he's going to be on the power play. I was like, yeah, if he makes it. But in the end, this is a business, and that coach in that locker room is going to play the best players that give him the best chance to win, because he wants to keep his job, because this is a business. And that was always the stance from the coaching standpoint. And I think in my time, the players were starting to kind of figure it out, but now these kids are professional, if not getting paid, but just how they act, how they carry themselves, their understanding of the game, the understanding of social media, the understanding of nutrition and fitness and wellness. These guys are professional players, and now you have that component of compensation added to it, where maybe we don't need the biggest budget, but we need to have something that's robust for them.
So just to be clear real quick before Eric chimes in, the general manager position created for these other schools is full-time recruiting, not so much NIL. So I think they're separate arguments. I think you need to have your NIL structure in place for coaches to have that war chest when they recruit a player and another school has offers. The general manager piece is so that you can have a staff member on the road recruiting full-time. Because only people recruiting off campus have to be on staff. So right now, like when the Gophers go on the road and there's a coach missing from the bench, it's because they're out recruiting.
Yep.
And that's why having someone like Paul Martin around is so helpful, because he can fill in and be that extra coach for Minnesota. That's such an advantage they have that a lot of other schools don't have.
And the players love Paulie too. Oh, how do you just not love the guy? He's an amazing.
Unless you're Jackson Lacombe and don't know who he was.
One of the things Jeremiah had said when we talked to him, Jeremiah Carter again with you, and this is absolutely true, and we're starting to see green shoots of this, I think is probably a better way of putting it, but nobody donates, or you can't make a whole lot of NIL dollars until the coach starts talking about it. You look at football, Dinky Down Athletes was created when the whole stuff came down with the O'Bannon lawsuit, but nothing really flowed in until PJ Fleck says, I need NIL dollars. Then all of a sudden, Dinky Down blows up into something. We've seen it this summer with Ben Johnson trading over to Nico Medved in the basketball program. And they're seeing, huge donations coming in now they never have on the basketball side, because Nico says, I need NIL dollars. So, I think the message is getting through to Bob and the staff. I think the staff get it. I think Bob is finally saying, I need to start talking about this. We need to start exploring this and addressing this so we don't get left behind. And again, I think we are in good shape all in, don't get me wrong. But when Bob starts talking about it and actually flows in, then I think we're going to really see, us in a really great spot.
Yeah, which is why we really wanted to work with him and say, hey, this is what we're doing. And I think at first, when we first chatted with him, it was like, well, I don't know if I need this. It's like, we don't need NIL money. It's like, well, yeah, guess what? Everybody else is raising it, and it's coming, and it's going to happen, right? So I think like we had some great conversations about it. And I was like, well, wouldn't you rather it'd be nice to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, right? So like maybe we get ahead of this before we, because if we have to try to launch this next year and it's like, hey, we got a week to get this done, it's not going to happen, right? But he talked about it at our alumni event when we gave him kind of the open mic, the State of the Union after the golf event, and he chatted about it and mentioned kind of like what we're doing, and that's where I started to get a lot of questions from the alums, and I've talked to a lot of them about it. But then when they started saying, well, how can I help? What can we do? That was pretty powerful. And I think, like I said, next year is going to be, this year and moving into next year will be kind of formative years for like, how the road is paved moving forward.
I do think that one of the things, if I had my maroon and gold phone that I could pick up and get Bob right away, would be he often talks about being in the head coach role as a caretaker of Minnesota. He'll say, I'm not Gopher hockey. I'm not the University of Minnesota hockey coach. I'm just the guy right now and behind the bench right now. And to be a good intentioned steward of the program and caretaker, you have to get this going, because it's going to take off in the next couple of years here where it's going to matter. And all of a sudden you're going to have players that you want to have commit, like Matthew Nyes, Logan Cooley's, and they're going to be tempted by what's out there, or they're at least going to want to have a competitive offer, right? It doesn't have to be the best offer, but it's got to be competitive. And if you don't do the groundwork to set up something like this, you are going to leave the program worse than the way you found it. So it's essential, I think, for him to take it seriously going forward the next couple of years.
And his credit, he is. So I mean, that's a starting spot with it. So it's good to start to see that. It's just a matter of, okay, now we got to get it rolling and put put the car in drive. So
let's go. Let's go.
I sense there's a lot of people in college hockey. This is a tough issue for them. We've seen so many coaches retire and hand the reins off to somebody younger who's more on board with it. And I think it's just happening across college hockey. And, you either change or die. T-Rex isn't around anymore because they couldn't figure out how to get away from the asteroids and the dust cloud in the winter. So
yeah, college sports in general. I mean, Nick Saban.
I know asteroid is coming.
It kind of is an asteroid, isn't it? Right? This NIL thing? Yeah. I mean, but it's college sports in general. It's a change of tune. It's an evolution type aspect, and it's good to be at the U of M. It's good to be in the Big Ten. We're well positioned for it. In North Dakota's got a tough spot for example, in their positioning. They're not a big Power 5 school. They're Power, not even a Group of 5 school. So how are they going to sustain what they have to do in light of Title IX, fundraise the way that they want to? I mean, if they've got that big Ralph Engelstad again, he could fund a team per se, but without that single donor, can they really do what they need to do to get above and in front of things? It'll be interesting to see how they do in light of this stuff, because every college in the country is seeing a demographic cliff right now. You have a smaller generation coming into college. There's fewer people going into college. You're seeing declining funding toward colleges, from public sources, federal government, and the like. So there's going to be a stress on extracurricular activities, is sort of saying this is not kind of ancillary to the mission of the university. Let's cut back. If you're North Dakota, you already have a potential Title IX issue because of how they do their system. They don't have a women's hockey program to balance things out. It'll get interesting there. It's going to get really interesting.
Just
we look at some of the.
I was just going to say, I just looked at my phone and we have another business that just reached out. So
are they watching the show? Thanks for watching.
Appreciate it. Like, that's great. Like, I'll get to you tomorrow morning. It's been a hell of a day.
All right, guys.
I mean, you look at some of the commits coming to Minnesota that are traditional St. Cloud names. McLaughlin, Comboy, the Cullens.
That's brutal.
You have these people that have ties to other schools, and now they're like, it's probably good to be with a Big Ten school like Minnesota. And I'm sure it's hard for Matt Cullen to make that agreement with his kids who see it happening and want to change lanes.
Jared Moe said when he left, when LaFontaine came back, we talked to him because he's a new preg guy, and he had said, I have a choice to go everywhere, but I want to stay in the Big Ten. Well, what do you mean? Well, you fly everywhere. You got catered meals. They treat you, way better than you would. If you're at other places, they're busing you places. This is my opportunity. They treat me like I'm in the NHL if I'm in the Big Ten. Yeah. I have my whole life to play in the AHL and in bus places. So,
well, you hear a lot of people say that college hockey is way better than the AHL and the ECHL. It's a great experience to develop. You're treated really well. You've got all the best stuff.
The college experience.
Get a college experience. You're not going to get traded or cut. You know, it's not like they can bring in players off waiver to replace you. The coaches are going to invest the time to develop you. As long as you give what they're trying to teach you, there's a path for you.
All right, it's past 10 o'clock, guys. We've been going a long time, 2.5 hours almost. 30
That's
seconds
summer.
we go.
I thought we were going to try to break the record. with
Oh,
Leo and
jeez,
I.
I can't. I'm getting too old for that.
I gotta drive home.
But thanks for coming on, guys. All of you. It's nice to get to see all of you for the summer. Stay online when we go offline here. I want to make sure your video's uploaded and whatnot. But thanks, everyone, for watching. It looks like we've had a pretty good crowd tonight. So we'll catch you in the fall, gang. Yeah, cheers.